Cindy going to join in? I don't see her.
Yes, I'm starting the meeting in YouTube right now, and then as soon as it boots up, then I'll start and she will come in and I'll promote her.
All right, so we're live on YouTube.
Okay, let me mute it. Okay, now let me start the webinar. The webinar is live. Attendees, panelists, attendees.
Okay, so
Well, here she comes.
So Cindy's coming in as Carol. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll change the name.
Okay. Well, you know, Cindy has been the minerals, keeping us in line, House Minerals, for years. So that it's a familiar name. So, okay, great. So Cindy, are you ready to take the roll call then? Just make sure she's all set up.
I'll run down there and check. She should be all set up. The room was showing earlier.
It's all right, we'll get it. So members, while we're waiting here before we call it to order, Representative Air had a prior commitment that he just, he felt bad he couldn't join us. But with this whole schedule that we have, I told him, don't worry about it. He'll have lots of opportunity to partake on the floor. He did leave a proxy vote for all of the bills. So, and he did get my multi-page explanation of some of them. So, sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Representative Burka.
Hey, just so you know, yesterday during committee meeting, we had problems with connectivity between the virtual meeting, the Zoom meeting, and the chamber rooms, the committee rooms.
Okay.
So support had to work back and forth on that connectivity issue, and I know that IT was working on it. I don't know what they've gotten accomplished though.
Well, and if Cindy doesn't get here and while we're live, we'll wait just a little bit more. I'll go ahead and take the roll call vote and then our attendance and convey that on to her. So we'll give a minute, make sure we're off on the right foot. That's where we'll be Monday morning, folks. Okay. Cindy, good morning. Can you hear us okay? Okay. Cindy, can I get a thumbs up? You can hear me okay? All right. Good morning. Good to see you. Hey, I'll go ahead. We'll call the meeting to order. Cindy, if you'll take the roll call for us, please. Okay. So Cindy, we're not hearing you.
How about now? Are you hearing me?
We sure can.
Hey.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Bear.
Present.
Representative Burkhart.
Here.
Vice Chairman Duncan.
Here.
Great. Representative Air.
He is excused.
Thank you. Representative Gray.
Here.
Representative Heiner.
Here.
Representative Sherwood.
Here.
Representative Western.
Here.
And Chairman Greer.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. So members, we are in essence, we're meeting as the House Standing Committee for Minerals. We're taking bills that were assigned to us by the Speaker, work them through this morning, get them ready. My understanding already for those bills that we kick out, they'll be some of the first ones up, probably I think coming out second up, as a matter of fact, on Monday, so we can get busy with Committee of the Whole and have a full slate to get the most use out of our remaining time down in Cheyenne. Today, we're going to hear House Bill 7, which Air Ambulance Membership Organizations. This is a bill that was worked through the interim that needed some more work. Representative Bear's kind of taken, not kind of, he has taken the lead on that for us. Hopefully all of you have a proposed amendment, which will be helpful as we work the bill. Then we'll go to House Bill 10, COVID-19 large business relief programs. That's Representative Burkhart's baby. Again, something we were working on through the summer, dealing with the first CARES Act, and now with the extension and then the possibility of additional CARES Act funds from the federal government. Representative Burkhart wants to continue to move that forward, and I think should have that in good shape. We did have a subcommittee. I think Representative Bear and Gray worked on some language on that, and so we have some amendments to look at. And then we have the WEPAC bills, which are sponsored by me, but we've got some distinguished attorneys in Wyoming in the trust and estates field that'll help us walk through those. And that's 64, 68, and 104. And then we'll finish up with House Bill 69, which should have been a committee bill, but I brought it, and it deals with the fees for the Division of Banking. And the reason why this bill is there is because of some of the bills we've seen in the past years dealing with banking that come out of the blockchain side did not have clear identifiable rule making authority in it. And I just felt that it was appropriate that we as a legislature make sure that when we have legislation that we clearly direct agencies how their rules will be set. It's not that the division's doing anything wrong. It's more of a cleanup item so that, in my opinion, we don't have an unlawful delegation, that we're very clear. So that was the purpose of that bill. So with that committee, we all know we'll work through the chairs. We've got quite a few people signed up to testify. Again, our debate goes much smoother when we work through the chair, and we have a civil discussion. I'll do my best to keep it organized for us, and let's get some work done for the state. So with that, the first bill up, and so Carol, for those people, I'm looking at the attendee list and I'm recognizing some names. Why don't we go ahead and start bringing in those folks who are going to, that wish to testify. If they'd raise their hand, the attendees will bring them in. You know, Tom Lockhart, Fred Franson, I recognize those other folks that are there, Jeremiah Riemann, and we'll get them ready. So while they're coming in,
Yes,
Representative Bear, would you do us the honor of walking us through House Bill 7?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my intent was to walk entirely through the House bill and then do the amendment. And I think I can more quickly go through it that way. Does that meet with your satisfaction?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. So House Bill 7, the real overall purpose of this bill is to correct some actions that we've made in the past with some statutes where we specifically were defining air ambulance membership organizations as disability insurance. That particular move on our part created undue regulation and an onerous amount of oversight. So this bill is an effort to correct that, and yet also ensure that there is consumer protections for those who are being sold these particular products, and allow the Insurance Commission an opportunity and guidance on how to oversee these types of organizations. These types of organizations are covered under the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978, and therefore they really can't be defined as an insurance product. So that is why we've got to treat them slightly differently, and that's what this statute attempts to do. So with no further ado, we'll get on to it. The bill itself is an page 1, just explaining what it is and redefining what the insurance, disability insurance is, and removing that portion of the definition, which includes air ambulance membership. That is what you see on page 2. We move to page 3. We have registration requirements here under 2643-302. This is all the requirements that these corporations will have to do in the state of Wyoming to be able to sell their products. Moving on to page 4, item number 4, we have the fiscal responsibility and how that will be measured by the commissioner. Moving on to page 5, and by the way, if anybody has questions along the way, just stop me and we can address those issues along the way. In the middle of page 5, we discussed that these particular certifications and registrations will be available for 1 year, and there is a fee that they will pay, and that will be for 1 year. And then 2643-303 at the bottom of page 5 discusses what renewals will be required. And I did skip, I'll back up. The fee is $500 or up to $500 for this registration. The renewal is $300. That's found at the top of page 6. Then at the bottom of page 6, we begin to talk about suspension rules if a particular company is suspended and what it would take to reinstate them. At the bottom of page 7, we get into the specifics of how a hearing would be handled for such a suspension. Moving on, we can skip all the way to page 9. At the top of page 9, we talk about the reinstatement of a suspended certificate. And then we get into the violation notices and penalties that the commissioner would use to notify a corporation that they are operating outside of the statute. On page 10, at 26-43-304, we have the commissioner's rulemaking guidance, and it gives specifics on what particulars in this particular statute would be the responsibility of the commissioner's rulemaking. On page 11, we have 26-40-305, and this is where we make allowances for membership fees. And it just states that they have to be reasonable there on line 16. We also, on page 11 at the bottom in paragraph B, we have contracts with aircraft providers, which is a little bit of a different type of corporation, and how they're handled in the statute. Moving on to page 12, we have the verbiage that describes how members of these organizations have a right to cancel. And then the rest of that page is talking about refunds and how those will be handled by the corporations to their members. Moving on to page 13, 26-43-306, we get into the exact verbiage for violations and penalties should a corporation operate outside of the statute. On page 14, we have annual report requirements for these corporations to the commissioner. That takes us all the way to page 16, where we get into the consumer protection portions of the statute. And I'm going to slow down a little bit here as we get into the very verbiage of that, as there are going to be some discussions I anticipate about the amendment that's coming forth. In particular, 26-43-308, we're beginning to get into how these products will be advertised and what information will be provided in the documentation that is being provided to prospective members. And that verbiage that I mentioned a moment ago is going to be found on page 19, subparagraph 2, and I'm going to just read that to you right now. And our concern here is that products would be already available and members would already have coverage under some other product, for instance, Medicare or a government entity purchasing it on behalf of the member. And we want to make sure that these organizations, as they're selling their products, ensure that anybody that is purchasing the product understands there's a potential that they are already covered under some other policy, and that coverage may be complete or it may be partial, but we want to make sure that if there's pressure sales, that they're letting those members know that they may not even need the product. And this is, again, is found on subparagraph 2. Current language reads that if eligible and covered under Medicare, the prospective member may already be covered for air ambulance services and should consult with a representative of the Medicare program to determine what services may be available under Medicare. So we're requiring that the organization inform the prospective members that that is out there. And then we can move on from there. We have a great deal more detail of disclosures that those organizations are supposed to provide. And then on page 21, we actually have the change in definition and the exemption of these organizations from disability insurance definition in statute. So you can see that under paragraph A, where we are redefining that. And then going down to subparagraph 2 of 26-5-103, we're striking the language that includes the air ambulance membership organizations as part of the definition. And with that, we have completed the greater part of the bill. Do I have any questions on the bill itself at this point before we go into the amendment?
Okay, so committee, just real quick, Carla, can you let, looks like Ruthie Barco has her hand up to come in. And then I didn't know if Commissioner Franzen wanted to come in. Okay, so what this webinar feature is interesting. So Representative Gray, did you have a general question? Let me do this real quick, Representative. So a little bit of history on this. Air ambulance membership organizations operated in Wyoming. 2 years ago, it's approximately 2 years ago, Labor Health brought a bill trying to, I think it was increase Medicare or Medicaid contributions to air ambulance services, which was, I think came out of an issue to try to keep work comp reimbursements down. We had passed that bill and it was fine at that time to take a look at it. Came back again the next year to try it again a little bit different way. There was a amendment came out of the Senate that then said that air ambulance membership organizations had to register with the Insurance Commission, just like a disability insurer, and then gave a year and so many months, which would have been, I think, April 1 of this year, or might have been last year. I might be off on my times a little bit here. And that's what stimulated this was, wait a minute, we're not insurance carriers. We're not insurance providers as we think of health insurance, but yet the reason that amendment came over was this issue of consumer protection. So that's kind of why we are where we are right now, is how do we allow them to operate in the state in a manner in which they had, but yet provide the consumer protection. So that's kind of why we're sitting where we are today. So Representative Gray, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The thing that really struck me that I'm a little confused about is why we don't repeal the original action in 2019. I mean, this has been sort of billed as a fix, and I'm just trying to understand. I don't see a repealer here, and that's one thing I really want to see. So that's my question.
Yeah. So Representative Gray, there is a Senator Case has a bill that just simply repeals that language and puts us back to the way we were. This bill on the last page excludes these the air ambulance membership organizations from being deemed. That's on that last page, and a disability insurer from that definition. So the policy discussion here for us when we vote is whether or not we want to provide the consumer protection component of this and operate that way, if this is the best way to go forward. So good question, but it gets right to the heart of the policy. Okay, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also add to that we do have some verbiage in here where we're both defining what these corporations are, and we're providing the commissioner with some ability to regulate them. It's just regulation light, if you will. in addition to those consumer protections. So those are the purposes of the bill, to provide that regulation light and the consumer protections. And I believe when we get to the amendment, you'll see that we're moving closer to what some other states have in statute for these particular organizations. Thank you.
So I think Representative Baird, just kind of stay in the ordinary order of business. We'll work the amendment after we take public testimony and work that as the committee. Right now, we'll go to public testimony. So any other questions of Representative Baird of the general bill and where we are right now of the committee? Okay, with that then, Carla, I see Margaret Wells has her hand up. We'll get her brought in so I know everyone that plans to testify, and I'll try to keep track. Commissioner Rood, we'll start with you. Your comments, please.
Oh, appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jeff Rood, the Insurance Commissioner for the state of Wyoming. Representative Baird, thank you for walking us through it. I didn't know if I'd get stuck with it or not, but I'm glad you did it. I appreciate that. And I think you were on point. My initial comments are we're normally, we're neutral on most bills. Having said that, this is a good bill. It makes it easier for the companies to register, and yet it still maintains the consumer protections that we're concerned with, that we've been made aware of after talking with so many people that called our office, and they're really spelled out clearly, and I appreciate it. And you are correct. This does mirror what's going on in Nebraska, and I think most of the companies that fly in Wyoming fly in Nebraska and are actually already in compliance there. So this shouldn't be anything too onerous, yet it still helps the consumers. So I'll stand back. I'll be here for questions if needed, and happy to answer anything you may bring, anyone may have.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for Commissioner Rood? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move to Tom Laycock with AARP. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good morning, members of the committee. I'm Tom Laycock, Associate State Director for Advocacy and Communications at AARP Wyoming. AARP Wyoming is a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization for people age 50 and over in Wyoming. Our interest in the bill involves asking for some basic consumer protections, one of which this committee has already been gracious enough to put in the bill as it stands today. We thank you for that. Today, I'll ask the committee if you have any interest in adding a second disclosure to the bill as well. AARP members and those of our members' age tend to be seen as a target market for some, but certainly not all, organizations that sell air ambulance memberships. In fact, there was an advertisement in Sunday's Cheyenne paper offering a free lunch this weekend if you're willing to sit through a sales pitch by one such company, which has in the past niched those advertisements towards those age 16 over. Our members have told us that these sales pitches can be pretty high pressure. There's no mention of any prior insurance coverage or the fact that the ambulance that you contract with may not be the one that actually picks you up. That's where the two recommended disclosures come in. So the first disclosure was written by the Department of Insurance, is already in the bill, is drafted, and requires that those selling the memberships just tell their audience that Medicare does offer insurance coverage on air ambulance, and Part B supplements can cover some version of the rest of that copay deductible. This disclosure encourages Wyomingites just to consult with their Medicare representative before purchasing a membership. The second disclosure we might recommend is one that just lets folks know that because they're buying a membership through one company, that may not be the company that actually picks them up. The fact is there are multiple companies that offer ambulance service in one area, and that can be a little confusing. We would actually suggest some wording into this bill that would say, and I quote, "You should know that blank company may not be the company called in the event of an emergency situation, and you may be responsible for the entire bill if a different air ambulance company provides the service," end quote. We aren't suggesting our members can't benefit from the service or they don't need one. Our members live lives in many different forms and fashions based on where they live, how they travel, what they do. Buying an air ambulance membership is a decision that has to be right for each consumer, and we just think a more informed consumer makes a better decision. So with that, I'll stand for questions, but I thank you for your willingness to take up the issue and offer a opportunity for us to comment today.
You bet. Any questions for Mr. Laycock, committee? Mr. Laycock, I do have a question. You had sent your proposed amendment to the committee members. The committee members, did you all receive that email? Okay, believe it or not, I've gotten a couple hundred emails along with 100 calls a day here the last week. I don't recall specifically. Did you have a page or a location where that amendment would be appropriate?
No, we thought perhaps right under the amendment that let folks know that they do have some membership or some coverage through Medicare or another county entity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Laycock. Any further questions, committee? Okay, we'll move right along. Yeah, Representative Bear. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Laycock. We have this amendment that the air ambulance corporations have brought forth. I just wanted to make sure you'd had an opportunity to review that and let us know if you'd had any concerns. I guess we can cover that when we get into it, but I just want to make sure you were fully aware of that particular amendment.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Representative Bear, thank you for the question. It was shared with us from GMB, if that's the amendment that you're discussing. We're pretty okay with it. There are a couple things maybe we tweak, but on the whole, we certainly understand where they're coming from.
Yep. Any further questions, committee? Good question, Representative. All right. Okay, I'm going to move to then Jeremiah Riemann and then Commissioner Franzen. I assume you two will speak as one.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We will speak as one voice. Mr. Chairman, committee members, my members are supportive of both this bill as well as Senate File 46. And Representative Gray, to your question, my members debated which one they preferred more, and they went with House Bill 7 for the very reason that it provides those consumer protections. And we do think that has to be a part of this equation when it comes to this service. But otherwise, we appreciate the fact that we are repealing the issue that was driven by putting this into the insurance department in the first place, and would ask that you move this forward. Mr. Chairman, with me today, of course, is the chairman of the Washakie County Commission, Mr. Fred Franzen. He also serves as the chair of our Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee, and he has a wealth of experience on this issue, and so I would defer to him for other comments.
Okay, before we turn that over, any questions for Mr. Riemann? I will note I am pronouncing your name correctly, Jeremiah, after 10 years. I can learn. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry about that. Commissioner Franzen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee. As Jeremiah said, that I am one of the county commissioners in Washakie County, and I'm here to strongly support the Air Ambulance Membership Organization, House Bill 7, and to thank you for bringing this very important issue forward. Washakie County has had an air ambulance membership for all of Washakie County residents since 2015. Share with you just a little bit of personal. 2 weeks ago, I had an elderly lady come into my office and show me a bill that she had gotten from our life flight provider by accident. A simple phone call and the bill was dismissed and marked membership covered. Unfortunately, I was not able to keep my 6-foot distance from her as she hugged me and thanked me, a lot. So anyway, just a personal touch there. The county's membership has saved our residents thousands of dollars by having no out-of-pocket expenses. And that membership has also saved lives by providing essential services for our residents. This bill will afford Wyoming residents an opportunity to continue or enter into a life flight membership while providing consumer protection. Without the passage of this bill, it will diminish that opportunity and any consumer protection. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will keep it short. I'd be happy and stand for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, any questions from Commissioner Franzen? So just, thank you, Representative Duncan. As a personal note, Commissioner Franzen's been a personal friend for well over 20 years. So any hard questions of him would be greatly appreciated by the chair.
I don't know if it's hard, Mr. Chairman, but Commissioner Franz, you've been at the very beginning with all of this through the summer and even the last time we heard this. So my question is, there was a lot of debate on the previous version of the bill that it was regulation heavy, and we were trying to get regulation light. And there was a lot of debate on whether that was a few pages or now here we're at what, 26 pages or 22 pages. So I would like to know your opinion on where do you think we stand now in terms of this bill? Are we more towards the regulation light direction where we wanted to go in our intention, or are we still a little heavy?
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman. Representative Duncan, I believe we are getting more towards the regulation light on this here. I agree that it was a little bit of heavy on this on the very beginning of it, but at this point in time where we are, it is regulation light, and it has that very important factor in there is that consumer protection that we really desperately need. There are some companies out there, as Tom Laycock has said, they are very persuasive with their speech. I've heard them all, well, not all of them, but most of them, particularly the one that he is talking about. And they are very high profile and they are very pushy on that there. And this here will help out with that there, especially when it comes to the marketing and the advertising of that there. I think this bill, I believe this bill here that we have it as now is going to take care of a lot of that pressure that our residents in Wyoming have been subjected to, and this will help with that.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Commissioner Franzen? Okay. Thank you. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the testimony of Mr. Franzen or Commissioner Franzen, I was led to believe that the county has a membership with an air ambulance service. And if that is so, will this legislation change the perspective of the county in such that they will not continue to carry that, or will they do anything differently with this legislation as proposed?
Yeah, good question. Commissioner Franzen.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Representative Heiner, this bill here will not affect our membership as we currently have one now until March of 2023. It will not affect our membership going forward after that we will still be able to maintain our membership with that. So I don't see that this here regulations, or excuse me, this House Bill 7 has passed, that it will affect our ability to provide that coverage for our county residents on that. So.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate it. Now I've got 3 other folks up on my screen, and so is there someone who's here specifically to represent a component of industry? I can see a Mark Kilman with a hyphen, and then Margaret Wells. So this Mark, okay. Would you please introduce yourself? And
yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me be here this morning. I do want to say something that I'm trying to stay brief because my wife is in the house and it's our 31st wedding anniversary and she's ready to go somewhere. So I'm going to make sure I don't talk too long, that I don't have a 30-second wedding anniversary. We from GMR Global Medical Response, we're the parent company of AirMed Care Network. And, you know, we're in support of this bill because we're not about not having regulations. We operate across the whole United States. We are accustomed to regulations. We abide by regulations. It's what we do. And we have not sold memberships in Wyoming since the law came into effect. And we appreciate Mr. Rude and the way he's handled this with our customers reaching out to him and talking to him. I do want to say that, you know, we have really tried to figure out a way to make this work and work with everyone. We, in prior testimonies, we've had people talk about how we've sold memberships in a location where someone does not, where we do not provide care. And that's mostly because people buy the membership because they go somewhere where we do provide care. So as many of you know, there's snowbirders all across Wyoming. I have family members in Torrington and Cody, and I was born in Natrona County and raised in Carbon. And so there's family members who have called me and said, why on earth have we lost our membership? Because they'll travel from the Cody area to Scottsdale. And if they were to be injured in Scottsdale, we would bring them back to Cody. So it's not necessarily that we, you know, have memberships and do things that we're selling stuff. We have a membership director, Jason Monday, who's on here with us, who explained to you that we map out with people and talk to them and tell them where we provide other services. So if they're going somewhere, they can also buy those services. You know, they can use those memberships. We are different than most companies because Global Medical Response, we provide or contract with our own providers. So we own and operate our own aircraft, and we're not selling for a lot of people. We're not selling memberships for other people. We are only selling for ourselves. And like I said, we stopped selling memberships as soon as this became a law to abide by the rules. And we just want to make sure that we can get back to providing life-saving care for people in Wyoming, helping people out and doing what we know we do best. And we really appreciate all the time and effort that's gone into this. And like I say, Jason Monday, our membership director, is here. So if there's questions about memberships, he can tell you how we do everything. And I think it's really important for people to know how we do our memberships. And just like I said, you know, Jason's team will go through the time to walk through a Wyoming resident and show them where we're located at and if a membership will be of value to them. Because that's what it's all about, is making sure that what they get their value for, and that they're not getting something that we can't provide them. But thank you very much for everything you're doing, and I'll stop there, and if there's questions, I'll answer.
Okay, committee, any questions for Mr. Burnham? Okay, Mr. Burnham, we appreciate your comments. I'm gonna make my, here comes questions, okay. Representative Western, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Killen Burnham, are you aware of the amendment that is proposed that basically says that if your company is providing service and that it may not be you that responds to an incident, it may be another company that you contract with? How do you feel about that amendment?
So if it's someone inside of our network, which in Wyoming we usually provide all of our services. I think we only, and Jason probably answered this better, but I think we only contract out to one person. But the amendment, if the amendment states that we must accept or must provide service for another membership, we can't do that. There's no reciprocity there on the air membership side, if that makes sense.
So I think Mr. Burnham, as Mr. Laycock had suggested an amendment that in your materials or a presentation that you disclose that in all emergencies you may not be picked up by an in plan provider.
Right, and we absolutely have that in our information now.
Okay, so you're not opposed to that amendment?
No, sir, not one bit.
Okay, go ahead, Representative Western. Any further follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the event that you guys do get a call to somewhere in Wyoming and your company cannot personally respond to it, and you have to use someone that's in your network or your carrier network, it sounds the way, if I understand this correctly, that client is going to be on the hook for all the bills in the event that it is not you and somebody that is in your provider network. Do I understand that correctly?
Go ahead, Mr. Burnham.
We are only going to provide service where we have aircraft or someone that provides for us. So if we can't respond, and which I I don't know that this has ever happened, but if we can't respond and someone else responds for us, someone's called another air ambulance company, then yes, that person would have to pay for that bill if for some reason we couldn't respond.
Yep. Any further questions, committee? Okay, Mr. Burnham, we appreciate your testimony. Just going to say my wedding anniversary, my 31st, is coming up on March 17th. I'll be spending it with 59 of my closest friends in the Wyoming house. So one of us should be happy. So we'll let you get to your spouse. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. So, okay, moving on. I see Ruthie Barco, your screen is up. Do you wish to testify on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ruthie Barco. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Air Methods. We serve Wyoming as Wyoming Life Flight based out of Casper. We have a fixed wing and a rotorcraft there. And we also serve as Air Life Denver and Flight for Life Colorado, which does serve Wyoming as well, geographically. We support House Bill 7 wholeheartedly as reasonable and common sense regulation to protect consumers of air ambulance membership products. Air ambulance memberships function like supplemental insurance. They pool risk, they provide financial coverage for patients in the event of an unforeseen medical emergency, and they collect a premium to cover the costs they are underwriting. Now that the Federal No Surprises Act has been passed and surprise bills will be prohibited starting in 2022, these membership policies will function even more like a supplemental insurance product because they will only be covering copays and deductibles for patients. This means that the way that HB 7 provides for the Wyoming Department of Insurance to have financial oversight of these products is even more critical now to ensure that consumers are charged fair premium rates. Because the No Surprises Act decreases the out-of-pocket liability that memberships are covering by prohibiting balance billing, the premium rates of these products should also logically decrease. Because local governments invest public funds to purchase these products for their citizens, it makes sense that the state has some regulatory oversight of these products to ensure that local governments are also being charged an appropriate rate. Similarly, because we know that these products are heavily marketed specifically to seniors and sold in large numbers to them, especially in rural areas, we think it is extremely important that there are strong disclosure requirements in place to inform seniors when they purchase a policy that it may be duplicative of their Medicare coverage. We applaud HB 7 for reinforcing these protections for seniors. Because Air Methods' own billing data shows that roughly 70% of our own Medicare patients end up paying less than $50 out of pocket. Seniors should not be made to feel that they need to purchase an air ambulance membership policy because of fear-based marketing, when these seniors likely already have coverage and therefore very limited out-of-pocket cost liability through a Medigap plan or any other supplemental coverage or even their Medicare Advantage plan. We thank the chairman and the members of this committee for their leadership on this important consumer protection issue.
Okay,
and I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
You bet. Thank you, Ms. Barco. Any questions, committee? Okay, we appreciate your comments. Okay, thank you very much. Let me move on. So I think, Chris Reimer, you didn't want to speak on this. You're for the next group, I believe. And then I've got Margaret Wells. Did you wish to speak on this? So I see Margaret Wells on my screen. Okay, I'll move on. Jason, is it Jason Monday? I see that name on the screen. Do you wish to testify?
I'm sorry, Chairman Gear, it's Margaret Wells. I couldn't poke the right button to unmute.
Okay, do you have a video screen?
I don't. I'm just I clicked the audio, so I'm not visible.
Margaret, that's absolutely fine. Would you do me a favor, introduce yourself to the committee, tell us who you are, and then go ahead and tell us what you need to tell us.
Thank you, Chairman Gear, and thank you, committee. I'm Margaret Wells. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Upper Wind River Valley Ambulance Association. Harold Albright is here with me. He is the president of the Upper Wind River Valley Ambulance Association. And we were formed back in 2015. We cover the coverage area from the Teton County line to Diversion Dam in zip codes of 82512, 82513. And we're ready to, Harold has a statement to present, but I just wanted to comment also, we have a membership with the Air Medcare Network, and we have several of a lot of Medicare patients here. And so I just wanted to comment on that before I gave the floor to Harold. We have people here, and several of them, that do not have supplemental insurance. And where this membership has come up to be invaluable for our community is that Medicare does pay. And I always recommend everyone, when they're getting insurance, that they need to find out if they're covered with that transport when they're purchasing insurance. But we have a lot of people that do not have supplemental insurance, and so they do have a bill. And whereas that membership has written that off, and there's been no expense for our community, and our community is somewhere around 2,000 people, and we've had a lot of life flights out of here, and it's been invaluable for our community. I'll let Harold have the floor.
Okay. And, Margaret, if you hold on just a second, any questions for Margaret? Okay, so then Margaret, yeah, Harold, and Harold, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Harold Albright. As Margaret said, I'm the president of the Upper Wind River Valley Ambulance Association in Fremont County, Wyoming. We were formed 5 years ago to figure out a way to provide pre-hospital emergency care, the best pre-hospital emergency care we could for the citizens in our area, which lost our ambulance coverage due to financial difficulties with the county-owned ambulance. I've worked as a Wyoming medic for a number of years. I continue to serve the people in our community, and what we've discovered is that in our community, this rural area, as most of Wyoming is, that practically every pre-hospital emergency can qualify as a medical necessity for an air ambulance or an air medical response. And so we see that a lot. As a matter of fact, in our area, in the last 5 years, we average 50 air medical transports out of our area per year. And a lot of those folks, when they get to a higher level of care, then they end up in an interfacility transport from one hospital to another, which utilizes an air medical carrier. So we support the repeal of the existing bill, as we understand from this meeting this morning. A lot of folks do. We support using the Senate file 046 to do that, as opposed to the House Bill 07. We do not believe that House Bill 07 serves the people of Wyoming in the most beneficial way when compared to 046. People of Wyoming, as I explained, need that air medical response for rapid, appropriate pre-hospital emergency care. And as we all know, those services are important, but they're also very expensive. And often they can create a balanced bill, even when folks have insurance or Medicare or workman's comp. They can create a balanced bill that is so great that it financially devastates the patient and the patient's family. So in the last 5 years that Margaret and I have been working with the folks in our community, we contracted with originally a carrier. We advertised for services, and we interviewed and negotiated with several companies. We ended up contracting with Guardian, and then Guardian Flight turned theirs over to Air Medcare. network, and we've used Air Medcare network for the past few years, and they've served us very well. What we've experienced is that the membership, we negotiate a contract with these carriers, and because we have 2,000 members in our community that we represent, then we've been able to negotiate a membership for originally $6 per member, and the last contract we negotiated with Air Medcare was $7.34 per member. So it's very affordable. That's something that we raise money locally to buy this membership for all the folks in our community. We've investigated other programs, insurance programs, and there's some wonderful programs out there, but they're not affordable for what we do as the Upper Wind River Valley Ambulance Association.
Okay. Committee, any questions for Mr. Albright? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it Mr. Obrecht?
Albright, yes, sir.
Albright, okay, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I lean towards your line of thinking on this bill, so I appreciate what you're saying. Appreciate your work, because I think organizing together, lowering rate, I mean, that's pretty impressive, the rate that you laid out, that you've been able to negotiate on behalf of people in Wyoming. So, I mean, can you just elaborate a little more on why you prefer the Senate file to this bill?
Yeah, good question. Go ahead, Mr. Albright.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a businessman. I own several businesses, and I do a lot of volunteer work in my community. And that volunteer work is mostly oriented around pre-hospital care for the folks for my fellow folks in this community. And so I work with the air ambulance companies, and we, as I said, we have a contract with Air Medcare right now, but we also work with other carriers. And because, as was pointed out earlier, it's not always possible for our provider to be the one that arrives at the scene, because as a pre-hospital emergency care provider, if someone is having an emergency and I need an air medical response, and the one that I normally use or have a membership with isn't available, well, then I get the one that's most appropriate and most available for the best care for my patient. So what I've discovered by working with these other companies, I apologize for talking in a circle, but what I've discovered by working with these other companies and visiting with them is that they backed away, or they expressed to us that they backed away from the membership program because they felt they were not in the insurance business. And I understand that you folks are working hard to remedy the way it stands right now, and appreciate that, and they do as well. But the reality is, as it's been explained to us, and we agree, is that memberships are nothing more than a contract for a prepaid discounted fee, which covers the balance billing. So we just don't feel that it would require all this other regulation. And we believe that regulation, even though it's better now, is still onerous. And in the 5 years that we've been doing this, we have not witnessed any predatory actions by the providers.
Okay. Any further questions, committee? Okay. Well, Ms. Wells and Mr. Albright, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've got Jason. Is Jason Monday? I think
Yes,
so.
sir.
Ask you to testify. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir, Chairman. I appreciate it. Representatives certainly appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. I'm the Divisional Director, Business Development for Air Medcare Network. I work on a national scope. I've been involved very heavily with Wyoming over the past couple of years. I wanted to make myself available to answer any questions and provide any clarity regarding our membership program. We truly value our relationships we built over the years with Wyoming residents and businesses, municipalities and organizations and entities. And our focus is to continue those relationships and provide not only a life-saving service, but also a financial peace of mind plan behind it. I would like to revisit Representative Western. You had made a comment or as a question regarding the network, and I want to provide some clarity on what our network is. Air Medcare Network is an alliance that brings together some of the largest air ambulance companies in the nation. They all fall up under global medical response. So all of those providers within the Air Medcare Network are our own assets. We own, operate, or lease those. We don't contract out to any other providers to belong to the Air Medcare Network. Therefore, when you look at the definition of insurance and stuff, there is no transfer of risk. There is no money being paid out. This is all internal. We're simply writing off something that one of our own entities has incurred as a service transport provider. The network grows continuously. Over the last 5.5 to 6 years, we've actually doubled in size. And that kind of brings some highlights onto why some members purchase it, where you may not see our aircraft based locally to them, because they do travel and they travel frequently. And our members expound upon this frequently to us, letting us know that, hey, we appreciate you being here in California because we're on vacation and unfortunately experienced a medical event and found out that one of your providers was right there and was able to save us a lot of money on the back end. The membership originally was designed and continues to be designed to pick up any expenses that are not covered by that individual's insurance. And this is any and all applicable insurances. This is stated very clearly in our terms and conditions, which are standardized across our entire footprint and have been very similar for 36 years. So we state very clearly, and this is why we support this bill, some of the things that are already in it, we already do as an organization. So we believe in being transparent and providing clarity to our members. We want them to invest and support our activities in something that truly can provide a benefit to them. So in our terms and conditions, we sit there and specify that air ambulance costs that are not covered by a member's insurance. So we encourage them to know what their insurance covers. The challenge is there's so many different plans, and we're not contingent and going to be reliant on a specific insurance carrier network agreement. As a provider service, we know how difficult it is to get all major carriers in an in-network agreement, and I have found none that have accomplished that. We have in-network agreements in Wyoming, and it's with major carriers, and this is a great benefit. But we're not going to dismiss the concerns of cost sharing, any of the co-pays, co-insurance, or in the event that the claim is medically denied, which can happen quite frequently through the claims process. So our product serves as a reinforcement that if all those things were to happen, or any of those things to happen, our members owe zero out-of-pocket expenses when utilizing any of our aircraft within the Air Medcare network. The other things we specify is that our membership only covers Air Medcare network participating providers, and we keep a website up to date. It's readily available. When we enroll people, we let them know who their local providers are, whether it's a face-to-face conversation or through our call center. So we're very transparent in letting them know who those providers are. We issue each one of our members membership cards, vehicle stickers, key fobs, everything we can to help communicate that message to them. And then we also specify that our service may not be available. And the reasons it may not be available is they're FAA 135 part operators. So weather, as you all experience in Wyoming more so than anywhere else in the United States, predominantly, weather can restrict the provider from being available. It can restrict us, it can restrict all other providers. In addition, there could already be in service. There's already a patient on board. So, you don't double the patients up. You have to wait for another aircraft. Or there's mechanical, and there's such things as crew rest requirements. So all these things can come into play. But if you look at the aircraft that we've invested into the state of Wyoming, the bases, you can see we continue to expand upon that and try to be available when our first responders need us to transport those patients. Membership, again, is just serving as that back end type product that's going to remove that financial concern from those patients if their primary insurance does not fulfill paying the full bill. So we firmly believe in it, have no intentions of altering it. We have great success with it. We love to hear our members come back and tell us that, as you've heard testimony from some of the municipal leaders, that we were able to remove that financial concern on their behalf. And that's including the Medicare population, with some of those that do not have any coverage under Medicare plans, and even those that have the 20% copays that are associated with some of those plans. So appreciate the time. If you have any questions, I would welcome the opportunity to provide any clarity I can.
Yep. Just a second, Representative Heiner, before I do that, little administrative component. So for, I've got Mr. Reimer, Mr. Leonard, and then and Marty Oblas are waiting. I had told him 9 o'clock. We have got, just so they're aware, we've got one more bill to hear after this one and a substantial amendment on this. So I'm thinking 10 o'clock is would be the time we'll pick up those trust bills. If you've got other things to do, go ahead and do that. We will not start House Bill 64 before 10 o'clock. So just so they're aware of that. Okay, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the testimony by Mr. Monday. Question for him, as he does business in other states besides Wyoming, and whereas Wyoming is a less populated state, is from his perspective, is Wyoming a business-friendly state for his type of business, or is it easier to operate in other businesses or other states? I'm sorry. And will this legislation make it more conducive to his business in our state? Thank you.
Good, Mr. Monday. Yep.
Certainly appreciate the question. I would say it was very business friendly previously, and then we ran into some obstacles there. Obviously, since we discontinued selling membership there, we had some opinions on some of the legislation that had been proposed and bills passed. Is the current bill as restrictive or less restrictive than others? I mean, there's obviously states that require nothing out there. They let us continue to operate under a membership model and have no concerns and are very supportive. However, we certainly understand your approach. We understand the consumer protection. One thing that we take great pride in is our retention rates, which to us is a mark, a report card of how well we serve our members, which is just north of 3.5 million as of today. We have some of the highest retention rates in all industries that are sales related, and they typically average around 87%. So you've heard some of the testimony from some of the municipal leaders and members of our product. I would encourage anybody on the call to reach out to some of the residents at the member level and let them talk about their experience. But to answer your question, there's less restrictive and there's probably equally restrictive, but we're comfortable with what's proposed.
Committee, any further questions? Okay, Mr. Monday, we appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it.
You bet. So it doesn't appear that I've missed anyone. We've got everybody covered for public comment. So committee, if we're ready to move on, I'll go ahead and close public comment. What is the committee's pleasure?
Move the bill.
Okay, it was moved by Western, seconded by Duncan. Okay, with that, I think Representative Bear, you want to walk us through the proposed amendment, which I think takes us down to really puts a little more light in the regulation light component. And while you do that, Representative Duncan, would you take the chair for a moment? My coffee cup is empty and I need more coffee. So.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, Chairman Greer.
Yes,
Before you get your coffee, I just want you to know I have no copies of any amendments. We did check SharePoint and none of them had been submitted. So just be aware, I'm kind of just flying here.
Well, okay, so Cindy, we'll walk through. If we adopt the amendment whole cloth, that'll be easy. Both Representative Burkhart and Duncan will help us track those in. So
Okay.
we'll work through that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Duncan. Please take the chair for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I believe we were at Representative Bear. You were getting ready to address the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All right, this is an amendment that I emailed out to you all, so I will go through it fairly quickly. Anything that
Representative Bear, did you already go through the amendment or are we moving the amendment?
No, we have not gone through the amendment.
Okay.
Only the bill thus far. So we really need to go over this. There's some changes that everybody needs to be aware of. I'm going to do it fairly quickly, though. A lot of these changes are just cleanup in the statute and so, or the bill itself. So those items I'm going to skip over. If anybody wants to address any of those, feel free to stop me, as well as the important issues as I address those. So with that, I will begin on page 1 of the amendment, lines 1 through 18. This is a better definition of what these organizations are and do. So it's just changing the wording of the definition of what an air ambulance membership company is, being much more specific. And then everything else is cleanup on this page. I will point out that line 22, where we delete the word is financially, is just a less vague description of what's being done there. And lines 26 through 30 of page 1 of the amendment adds language found in Nebraska's statute establishing a specific level of financial responsibility. With that, we'll go on to page 2. Everything is cleanup or making the language less vague until we get to lines 9 through 14. This makes the language match that of other Wyoming statutes regarding financial responsibility when an organization is found guilty in a violation. Then we move on down to lines 19 through 21. These are being more specific verbiage about who this bill applies to. Now on line 26, it's a less specific as to the methodology. It allows verbal versus written in their disclosures. Line 28, which is going all the way to page 3, line 7. This adds definition to the fiscal requirements for the purpose of proving fiscal responsibility of the organization. It provides for a bond amount, and it provides a reserve amount and the size of that reserve. This allows the commissioner to judge the fiscal viability of the corporation. Then moving on to page 3, lines 5 through 7 determines fiscal responsibility to members after a judgment and on behalf of a particular member. Then line 9 deletes unfair trade practices. It makes this part of the bill less vague. Line 11 removes the reference to Unfair Trade Practices Act. And then everything is cleanup until we get down to lines 24 through 28. This allows language to be used to more clearly define their business to customers by comparing to what it is not. So this particular verbiage in the bill as it sits is very restrictive about what words can be used, and unfortunately it does not allow the organization to explain to the customer what it is not. Everything else on this page is going to be cleanup. I will mention that down on lines 46 to 47, this is using normal size print versus the bill as it's written is looking for a very large bold print, but it is avoiding fine print. On to page 4, we have cleanup again, and then when we get to lines 4 through 6, this removes vague language regarding coverage by Medicare, and it recommends contacting a Medicare representative to find out if you are covered. So that is verbiage that the salesman is to use when talking to a prospective member. On to lines 15 through 20. This removes an air ambulance membership company's responsibility to do the research as to whether a customer has other coverage under Medicare or any other membership, for instance, where these counties have purchased memberships, but really puts the onus back on either the customer or the state if they contact them, or the county to find out what kind of coverage they have. And everything else is cleanup until we get down to lines 29 through 33. And this inserts a description of the refund policy. And with that, we have covered everything in this particular amendment. I will say that in clarity, the amendment being brought by Mr. Laycock and the AARP, that would be inserted. I'll give you this specific spot where it needs to be inserted. Add it. Give me just a second here. Apologize about moving on to a different amendment, but I know that's going to be a question here very soon. Line 19, I'm sorry, page 19 and subparagraph 2. That's where that particular one is. Okay, with that, I'll stand for questions about the amendment.
Okay, so yeah, Representative Duncan, I'm back, so that's fine. I guess the first thing is do we want to move the amendment and then discuss it? So Representative Baer, do you wish to move the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do wish to move the amendment.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Representative Western. Okay, then questions on the amendment. Representative Heiner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the amendment on page 2, line 32 through 35, it talks about a surety bond for $5,000 for every 1,000 members of the organization. And we heard testimony from Mr. Monday that they have 3.5 million memberships. So we're talking about $17.5 million bond. Was this proposed as membership or organizations within the state or organization wide for these entities?
Representative Baer?
My understanding is this would be members within the state, and we might need to make that language a little more clear in both the amendment and the bill.
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Baer. Thank you.
Yeah, and so Representative Baer, this bond was suggested by industry, is that correct?
That is correct. And again, this is language that's found in another state in the Nebraska statute, and that was brought by the air ambulance organizations to us.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Heiner, did you have a proposed amendment to the amendment regarding the specificity of membership in the state?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we would make this legislation a little more clear by stipulating that it is only within the state, so that we don't have that conversation later in committee of the whole.
Yeah, so Representative Heiner, looking at the amendment on page 2, line 34 and 35, are you committee with me?
Yes.
Okay. I guess your proposal would be 1,000 members of the organization or 1,000 of the members of the organization who are residents of the state of Wyoming?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what I would propose.
So, okay, so members, and I'm looking at Representative Duncan and Burkhart. Okay, so we have a motion from Heiner, a second from Burkhart, be line 35 of the amendment. Members of the organization who are residents of the state of Wyoming. And for LSO may tell us we don't need the state of Wyoming. It'll just be of the state because of our state statutes, but I think we understand the amendment. Is everybody clear on that? Any further questions on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous. Okay. We're back on the amendment. Any further discussion? Representative Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to understand a little more the thrust on this, the legislative background or the history on it. Sorry, I was not on the committee in the interim. Is this sort of a outside of the surety bond? Is this just sort of a potpourri of things that had been viewed as maybe a little too far? I'm just trying to understand the history on it. So thank you.
Yeah, Representative Gray, I think that's a good thing for us to discuss. Is that specifically with the amendment, or do you want to wait till we get the amendment dispensed with?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd rather before I vote just understand the legislative history on it. But
yeah, fair enough. No, that's fine. I'm just so let me address that a little bit. Again, and my years are going to be off just a little bit, but a bill was brought out of Labor Health to try to address an issue with these large air ambulance charges that were hitting the workers' compensation fund. That's where this discussion started. And the bill came to try to see if we couldn't get Medicare or Medicaid. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was both, to pay a higher sum on air ambulance charges. Okay, so that was the push. That bill came through. Nothing came out of that effort by the state. But the bill came back around to go ahead and continue that with a little different look. And an amendment came out of the Senate. And the amendment went ahead and said air ambulance memberships now have to be and apply to the state like they're a regular health insurance company. Well, they're not health insurance companies. They're just not. Well, and this is one of these things where as legislators, and again, why I'm trying to slow us down on the floor when we do concurrence votes. So listen to me when I try to slow those down. We concurred to that Senate amendment. I voted for that Senate amendment without knowing the ramifications of it. I'll own that, okay? And then what happened is like my county, that's why my county commissioner was on here. We've had a membership agreement in place, what do you say, for 2015, I think. It's been serving our community very well. All of a sudden they're like, Mike, these companies, they're not insurance companies, so they can't apply. They're going to go away. So that's why we were at. Then this got assigned to minerals. I don't know why, but it got assigned to us. I think because it was a big issue with my community. Is why.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt you real quick. I think House Minerals microphone is on and we're getting feedback.
Okay, Cindy, can you help us out there? So as this came forward, what we heard through the interim is there was a great deal of concern about the consumer protection side of this. And there are quite a few legislators out there who were concerned about the consumer protection side. So that's what we looked at, is how do we have minimum registration requirements and allow for consumer protection. The good actors within industry said, yeah, we're fine with consumer protection. We want to take care of consumers. They're our customers. We worked this bill in the interim, and I felt as if we worked it a little too hard. And that's why I asked Representative Baer to work with industry, and that's his amendment. The one we're looking at was industry coming in and saying, yeah, we're fine, but we don't need this much regulation, and these things are problematic. And this amendment took out those things that were problematic. And I asked this question specifically. I said, well, this bond component's new. And that was offered up by industry to show that they're good actors, good players, and solid businesses. So hopefully, Representative Gray, that gives you a little bit of that background of why we are where we are and why we're in minerals with this. Okay. Any further questions then? So sensing we are voting on the amendment, there's a question on the amendment. We're voting on the amendment presented by Representative Baer with the minor amendment by Representative Heiner. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see that as a unanimous vote. Okay, thank you. With that, committee, is there a need to work the bill page by page, or should I just ask if there are any further amendments? I'm open to either or. Let me ask you this, Representative Western, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was thinking about maybe moving the amendment that Mr. Laycock had proposed in terms of disclosure.
Okay. Do you have a page and a line for that, Representative Western? That'd be a good item to discuss.
I don't, Mr. Chairman, I do not. I would certainly be open to.
Representative Baer can help you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That would be page 19, and the line number, it is subparagraph 2. I believe the best insert position would be at the end of the current verbiage, so that would be line 15. Now, our amendment may have moved that, but that is, as the bill sits, this would be page 19, line 15. I guess let's look at our amendment here real quick, just to make sure. to get that right.
Is it a Representative Bear? Is it a new subsection? Is that, and we read?
No, this would be part of subsection 2.
Okay.
And that was based on Mr. Laycock's testimony that that's where they would like to see it. I concur that would be a good spot for it.
Okay, so it'd be at the end of line, so page 19, line 14, after Medicare, we would insert a comma and then the language you're going to state.
Yes, with the exception that when we insert the amendment we just passed, that does change the line numbers.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and work off the bill. We'll have LSO can conform that for us, Representative.
Very
That'd be fine. Okay. Okay, so do you, so the language you would have after that. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a copy of that amendment? And I just need to look in my email?
No, I'll forward it to the committee right now. So on page 14, how we would insert this, just a moment here. But I'll help us out.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Bear.
We did all receive that email from Mr. Laycock. This was yesterday morning. So if you look through your email, search under Thomas Laycock, you should be able to find that amendment.
Okay. Let me look here. I'm trying to make sure we get this in here in a way that works. Okay, this would be my suggestion on this, is that we would do a new subsection 3 that should say, and this is a disclosure to the consumers, that you should know that the air ambulance membership organization may not be the company called in event of an emergency situation, and you may be responsible for the entire bill if a different air ambulance company provides the service. That, I think we're going to have to work on. It does not fit in structurally very well, but that is a proposed amendment. Representative Sherwood?
Mr. Chairman, just a suggestion in terms of structure and topical, that it may fit in better on, so as the bill stands, page 20, line 14 through 21 sort of addresses the same topic. So perhaps right before or right after that section.
I agree. Do you see that, Representative Bear?
I do, Mr. Chairman, and I do agree with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, again, where were we specifically, page and line?
Go on the original bill. So, okay, on page 20, if you look at Romanet 6, okay.
Have it.
Yeah. And so on that, okay, so I've got to, so there we're giving a disclosure. They're providing a disclosure that in an emergency, the prospective member is outside the service membership service area. And then what we should do is this is what I would suggest, and Representative Duncan and Burkhart follow along with me, is that air ambulance provider, then insert a comma and say, and in such event, the consumer or the customer, the customer, may be responsible for the entire bill. And then that boils that down. That's just more of a disclosure. Because what we're saying is that if you have a membership and if you're outside the service area or another company is provided, and as we heard from Mr. Monday, you may have to pay for all of it, even if you have a membership. Representative Western, you started this amendment. Does that seem to fit with you?
Mr. Chairman, that sounds great.
Okay. Committee, do we understand what I said? Representative Burkhart?
Mr. Chairman, just so I know I have my notes correct, would you repeat it, please? I'm on line 17, after provider, insert a comma. Correct?
I'm on page 21.
Page 21.
Page 20, line 21.
Okay. Thank you. Wrong provider word.
Yep.
And Mr. Chairman, is that a full new sentence on that, or is it a comma?
I'd do a comma, and it will, if LSO needs to do a punctuational correction, we'll call that technical.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And if you would just repeat your wording, Mr. Chairman, please.
I would say, and in such case, the customer may be responsible for the entire bill.
Okay, I have it. Thank you.
So that's a disclosure. If you're out of service or a different company, ambulance, airplane picks you up, or helicopter. Okay, we understand what we've got. We got Representative Duncan, Representative Burkhart will be able to help Cindy with that.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, a clarification. Originally you said consumer and this time you said customer. Which would you prefer?
I think customer is what we've used throughout.
Okay.
Actually, what we need to do is put prospective member.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Prospective member, sorry. Okay. Do we know what we're voting on? Sorry, this is a bit awkward. That's why this works better in person. A lot better in person. Okay, Cindy, and we'll make sure and help you with that when we follow up, okay? All right, committee, you understand? So amendment by Representative Western. Is there a second? Representative Sherwood is second. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see that as unanimous. Okay. All right. Any further amendments or on the bill? Okay. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Gray, you want to talk about this a little bit more? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just want to note, I am going to vote no, just because I prefer the Senate option. I'm totally in support of rolling this that bill back from 2019. I voted no originally. I had a lot of concerns about it, and I appreciate the work of the committee. I just prefer the Senate version. Thank you.
Okay, no, completely understandable. Completely understandable. I did not vote no. I screwed up. I'm publicly admitting that. So, okay, Representative Bear.
I just want to say that normally I would probably be with Representative Gray on a no vote on this because of the regulation. I prefer less regulation, but based on the testimony I've heard about consumer issues, I think the consumer protections are important here. And so I'm going to be an aye vote for the bill.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Okay, any further discussion, committee? All right, well, sensing we're ready to vote. Cindy, are you ready to take a roll call vote on this? So we need your microphone off. Still can't hear you. You're still muted. Okay, Cindy, if you can hear us, I'll go ahead and call the roll on this. Can you give me a signal that you can hear me? Okay, so we'll go ahead and take this. I don't know if I'll do this correctly, but Representative Bear.
Aye.
Okay, Representative Burkhart.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Gray.
No.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Okay, Representative Ayer left a proxy vote of aye. Representative Sherwood,
Aye.
Representative Western.
Aye.
Okay, and as chairman, I will vote aye. So I have that as an 8-2 recommended that we do move this on to the House floor. Representative Bear, I assume you'll continue to manage this for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I will. But the vote count, you said 8-2.
Oh, sorry, 8-1.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not that good at math. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I just emailed Cindy the notes, so she has it right now in her email.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll keep her with the amendment too, with Representative Bear's amendment. Okay, good. We'll follow up. We'll get an opportunity to look at that. I'll run that by you, Representative Duncan, so second set of eyes, and we got a little bit of time to clean those up. Okay, well, great, folks. So the next item that we then have up is House Bill 10. And there are a couple of attendees in the audience. I got Kevin May, so Marty's going to be on the next matter. Representative Burkhart, would you go ahead and walk us through House Bill 10?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 10 was worked during the interim as a relief bill for some of our larger businesses. These were businesses that during the interim and during 2020 maintained employment, kept a number of our communities throughout the state financially strong, and kept the economy going by keeping their own employees employed at their expense. And the bill's intention is to allow them to have some relief from a number of the expenses, losses they experienced in 2020 due to doing all of that. It's for our larger companies. Many of these companies did not take advantage of the PPP program or any of the other programs because they were ineligible. The criteria is that they either have $1 million in taxes assessed on real property or $10 million in gross payroll, both in 2019. And that they have principal operations located in Wyoming, employed at least 100 full-time employees in Wyoming whose job was principally performed here, and that due to required closures and those sorts of things due to the corona pandemic, experienced significant losses. The program's created with the Business Council administering it, and they will have an application process. And that they have to submit a plan for the expenditures. They're used to cover business losses due to payroll costs, business supplies, business equipment necessary for normal operations, equipment to address the coronavirus, such as cleaning, extra personal protective equipment, extra rent, mortgage, utilities, additional operating expenses. The council is directed to establish other criteria for application and to compare 3 months, April, May, and June of 2020 with April, May, and June of 2019, and to calculate any losses or additional expenses against the corresponding months. The stipends awarded are limited to $1.5 million per eligible business, and that they're made from the COVID funds provided to Wyoming. And there are stipulations that they must repay the funds if they don't meet certain requirements, such as maintaining principal operations in Wyoming for 3 years after receiving the stipend. They have to report to the council and repay the funds at 2% interest if they don't follow the criteria.
Okay, so Representative Burkhart, we heard this earlier when we were teeing up, if you recall, before the virtual session. We had taken public testimony at that point in time. We had some concerns we wanted to address. And so we had, I think it was Representative Gray, Burkhardt, and Bear, I think maybe worked on some additional language. So here's kind of where we are procedurally. One is I don't have anybody signed up to testify. So with that, I would normally take public testimony if somebody wanted to comment further. But we don't have any, so we'll close that. We'll work this bill. Again, we had laid that back. So I think the proper thing to do is, if we're going to work it, is move it. And then Representative Burkhardt, just dive into your amendments. One is a technical amendment to deal with dates, I think. Maybe we dispense of that quickly. And then we get into more of the substantive component of it. Does that committee sound like a good plan?
Yes.
So with that, I would entertain, what's the committee's pleasure with respect to this bill? Does someone wish to move it?
Move the bill.
Okay, moved by Bear. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Duncan. Okay, so with that, Representative Burkhardt, you have emailed us 2 proposed amendments. Do you want to tackle more of the technical one first, or how? I'll sit back and let you work it. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer to tackle amendment numbered. The last digits are H1501.
Okay.
The upper left-hand corner. And this is both technical amendments and some additional. We just combined, the subcommittee added in 2 additional items in this just for ease of discussion. So we didn't have a stack of paperwork. And when we get to those 2 new sections, I will let Representative Gray explain them. He and I have already talked about this. So if you look at the amendment, what the amendment does, starting on page 1, is changes the dates, because if you remember, this bill was drafted in 2020 and the CARES Act funding was scheduled to end December 30th of 2020, which is obviously passed. However, there were an extension, and we have to address that issue plus the potential for additional, call it CARES Act 2 funds in 2021. So what was developed was the term covered period, with a definition that the covered period goes until December 31st of 2021. And that's the gist of most of this amendment, was to extend out that to go by the defined covered period rather than specific dates in this coming year. And so for that part of it, and that would be page 1, line 1 through 24, and then, or 22, either way. And then on page 2, lines 10 through 23. Now we can divide the amendment, but I think it works just as well to keep it whole. And I'd let Representative Gray explain the 2 new subsections on page 1 and 2. They start at line 27 on page 1.
Okay, so I think I screwed up a little bit. Representative Burkhardt, did you move? Would you like to move the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the amendment.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, seconded by Duncan. Representative Gray, did you want then to comment or tackle that language starting on page 1, line 26?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we did here, there were two big changes. The first is Romanet 12, which is setting a 21-day application, 21 calendar day application time limit. That was kind of based off the experience of the Wyoming Business Council, that just keeping this open-ended. I mean, it makes it clear so that there's not someone who comes in on the end and says, hey, you know, why are they not qualifying? And it makes it clear that there's a certain number of days. So it was kind of off the experience of Wyoming Business Council. And then the heart of this, why we created the subcommittee, was Romanet 13, which creates this sort of objective criterion, which is all info that the Wyoming Business Council is going to already be asking for under this bill. So we're not asking for any new info that was not already required. And the Wyoming Business Council confirmed that in their interpretation of the bill, what they were going to ask in the application. And rank, prioritize, and first provide stipends to those eligible businesses with the largest percentage of decrease between actual losses of sales, revenues, or production in the months of 2020, plus any COVID-related expense incurred in the months specified in paragraph 5 of the subsection, with the amount of corresponding sales, revenues, or production in the same months in 2019, minus any costs or expenses the eligible businesses did not incur that it otherwise would have normally incurred, but for the COVID-19 public health emergency. So bottom line is they're going to compare 2020 to 2019, and those that had that largest percentage of decrease between actual loss of sales, revenues, or production, that's going to be the ordinal ranking. It's not going to be based on number of employees. We discussed having that as part of it, but we just decided to go with that percentage delta decrease. That's the portion that I had worked on. So I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Representative Gray, go ahead, Representative Burkhart. I'll let any questions.
Mr. Chairman, no, go ahead, and then I can follow up.
Yeah, so I did have a question. I think this is good to find an objective standard and be clear with this. And so we're talking about sales. So we're going to just look at gross revenues. That's correct? We're not going to worry about net revenues.
Exactly. Yes,
okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Representative Burkhart, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to follow up and show you that actually subparagraphs 12 and 13 work together. All the companies have 21 days to submit an application, and that gives the Business Council plenty of time to evaluate them. It gives the companies plenty of time to submit them. They don't have this first in, first out sort of rush, almost like a Le Mans start of racing cars, of you get in first or lose money. Then you have the ranking based on all of those submissions, and that so that the hardest hit companies are given fair consideration. So that's it in a nutshell. I think they work very well. Representative Gray and Bear and I worked this with the Business Council and with staff to come up with the language that we feel works well.
Okay. All right. Any further questions on this first proposed amendment? Not seeing any. Is question being called? By facial expression? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. That is a unanimous vote. Okay. Representative Burkhart, I believe you had a second amendment. Do you wish to?
I do. This is amendment numbered H1502 in the upper left-hand corner. Also sent out yesterday or the day before. Time flies when you're having fun. And if I can get a second on it, we can discuss it.
Okay, amendment's been moved, seconded by Duncan. Go ahead, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, where this amendment comes from was discussions with the Business Council. They had some concerns over some of the specificity of the bill and suggested this wording based on their experience with the other relief programs. And that what this does is it removes, and you can see it from lines 1 through 9, it removes all of the specified costs, losses, expenses, and instead goes to what will actually end up being a netted out loss or cost. You take all the extra expenses, you take in all of the money a company may have received from other programs, and that addresses the two paragraphs that are noted as deleted on line 6, paragraph 5 and 4. And the reasons are those were non-double dipping paragraphs. This by its nature takes care of that double dipping by saying we deduct out any money you've already received. It makes it a lot simpler, a lot more direct. And then, really it's just losses on one side against the period versus normal, And so it does work very well. It relieves business counsel of a lot of additional work and a lot of, I would say, subjective decision making. Then the rest of that amendment from line 23 on is renumbering. Now, in light of the amendment we already passed, the renumbering would be different. So I would just direct staff to conform and renumber as appropriate.
Yeah.
So that's the amendment kind of in a nutshell. Reduces the size of the bill, achieves what we had originally wanted the bill to do, gives Wyoming Business Council some directive and some leeway with, at the same time, actually tightening up some of the decision-making process.
So Representative Burkhardt, as I read this amendment, that means your loss, so coming off the last one, your gross loss in sales year over year, okay, plus your COVID related expenses are then tacked on. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Mr. Chairman, correct.
Okay.
You have your losses, you tack on the expenses, you deduct out any monies you may have received from other programs, and you have end up with a net percentage loss. And then that would go to the previous amendment adopted, where they would compare all the netted out losses by percentage to award the funds.
Okay. Right, I understand. Committee, any questions on this amendment? Not seeing any. Question being called?
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Okay. That is unanimous. Okay. Committee is going to be hard to work this bill page by page. Are there any further amendments on the bill? Okay, I didn't think there would be. Any discussion on the bill, committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a couple questions. You know, this one, just because some small businesses I've gotten contact, you know, that they missed out. I've been struggling with this one a little bit, you know, in terms of proper allocations of the funds. So I want to ask a couple questions. One is, were there any of these programs that were for for businesses over 100 employees? I mean, at one point, this says in here that that any other, they can't reimburse for any other program that was created that they already received reimbursement for. So I thought the premise of this was that no program had hit them at all. And I'm not sure that's true, because I thought the last version, that endurance fund, did hit some larger businesses. So I that's my question. Thank you.
So Representative Gray, you're right. We had it been the fourth fund, our fourth pool of money out of the bill we passed in special session did go to primarily larger businesses to cover direct COVID related costs. So there were funds that were available, and I think that's what Representative Burkhardt's amendment's doing is making sure we're accounting for those. Is that correct, Representative Burkhardt?
Mr. Chairman, that is. That way there's no double dipping. And that was a concern during the interim that we discussed heavily, was the avoidance of any double dipping of getting two funds and that when other companies don't get any.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions on it? Committee, I'm going to go ahead and vote a conflict on this. The company that I manage, for 7 months out of the year, we're over 100 employees. For 5, we're under 100. My company did not apply for any state funds. That was a conscious decision on my part. There is a chance that this bill would cover, that my company would follow under it. The company I run, it's not my company. I have an obligation to my owners if the bill was available for us. So I'm going to go ahead and vote a conflict, Not saying we're going to apply, but if this bill passes, we'll probably, I probably have an obligation to direct my folks to look at it. So just so you're aware. Okay, any further discussion on the bill?
Question.
Question being called. Cindy, are you available to take a roll call vote this time?
Yes, I think I am. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. So please proceed. Roll call on House Bill 10.
Okay, Representative Beer,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Duncan,
Hi.
Representative Air has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Gray,
No.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Sherwood,
Aye.
Representative Western, pardon me.
Aye.
And Chairman Greer.
I'm conflict.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 7 ayes, 1 no, and 1 conflict.
Okay, so that is passed. We'll move that for a recommendation to the committee of the whole. Committee Representative Burkhart, I assume you'll continue to manage this.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Committee, this break till 10 o'clock. I'm sorry, Cindy, did you have a question?
I just have a note on here for re-referral. Will that be the case?
Yeah, I'll need to make a referral on this.
Okay, and you will take care of that?
Yep, yes, I will.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep, no, thank you for reminding me. I appreciate it. Okay, let's go ahead in this break. Let's come back. Let's try to start about, 10:02, 10:03, something right around there. Okay, thanks, committee.
Chairman Greer, you're not muted.
It's a good thing I didn't curse. So Don, I was looking at that. I don't think I meet the threshold on gross payroll, though.
Oh,
I'm shy of that number. That's one of the requirements that stayed in.
yes, but it's an or.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I thought I was just doing a quick look. I was looking at that and I had it in my mind that you know, we had significant costs in terms of our out of pocket dealing with COVID related stuff. And then it's also had
just a reminder, I think we're still live.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying to you. I'm not going to say to anybody else. So it doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. I just didn't want you to use some sort of expletive that you might have to later retract.
No, I'll do my best. So, okay.
Yeah.
So
Can I ask a
Carla,
question
could we let into, okay, do we have, we've got Dershie and Marty and then Bob Leonard, if we could let them in.
Yes, sir. I'll do that right now.
Thank you. Representative Bear, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Representative Burkhart. That or statement, I'm trying to find that myself because I had a company here that was thinking that they weren't going to be qualified either based on the payroll amount. Can you show me exactly where it says that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
That is on page 2 of the bill, line 15 through 22, under subparagraph C1, the last word or.
Okay.
Line 17.
All right, so we're waiting on Representative Western, but we'll go ahead and punch forward. So we'll go ahead and bring the committee back to order. So the next set of bills up are 3 bills that I'm the prime sponsor on, but they really come from a group of people working in the trust and estate realm around the state. And this has been ongoing, goes back to Speaker Brown in working to make our laws some of the best laws. And as you'll see, some of the things we've been doing with respect to the banking division over the years in the Minerals Committee, also those things that come to us from blockchain, all kind of come together as a kind of flies under the radar, but a diversification of our economy, some of what we're working to do. And so what I think I'll do is we've got an all-star lineup. Good to see Dershie join us. We've got an all-star lineup here, and I'm going to let them take the lead on this. And I'm going to start off with Robert Leonard and let him kind of do just a bit of an overview. And then I think Marty's going to move in with explaining our first bill up, which is House Bill 64. So with that, Mr. Leonard, please introduce yourself to the committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Greer. I'm Bob Leonard, and I am of counsel of the firm of Nicholas and Tangeman over in Laramie. And I've been a member of an organization called the Wyoming Estate Planning Advisory Council since 1998. And we have been sponsoring legislation to keep Wyoming in the lead in the area of trust and wills since that time. We are an organization that is composed of attorneys, trust officers, and occasionally we have some CPAs involved too. The legislation that we are proposing in the 3 bills today are not only from our organization, but we were joined by the Wyoming Trust Association this year in coming up with the drafting of these bills. People that were involved are Chris Reimer, Marty Blaster, who's on today with us also, Mike Bohl, Bob Liebrick, who are trust officers with Wyoming Bank and Trust and with First Interstate Bank, and Scott Weaver from the Wyoming Trust Association. The bills are designed to keep us in the lead or near the lead as a trust venue in the United States. Other states are constantly updating their trust laws. We also need to do the same thing. Our 2021 proposals are primarily designed to address some weaknesses where we are comparatively rated not in the first tier. We want to stay up in that first tier. So these proposals that we're proposing this year are to try to keep us in that first tier, because keeping Wyoming in the first tier brings more trust to Wyoming, gives us more employment in the areas of trust officers, CPAs, trust companies, increases the assets held in Wyoming trusts. So the first bill that we have is House Bill 64, which is the Fraudulent Transfers Act. And as Chairman Greer had said earlier, Marty is going to talk about that. So I'm going to go on mute and let Marty come in and speak to that bill.
Okay, before we do that, Carla, would you go ahead and let Mr. Meyer in? You know, these Fremont County guys are always late. So we'll go ahead, and if he wishes to be admitted, we can do so.
Here he comes.
Okay, we don't have any Fremont County guys on the committee anymore, so we can give them a heck of a time. Well, Marty, please introduce yourself, and if you go ahead and take us through and explain House Bill 64, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Marty O'Blasser, and I am a partner of Corthell and King in Laramie, and as I like to say, Wyoming's oldest law firm. But I appreciate the opportunity to discuss House Bill 64 with you today. As Mr. Leonard mentioned, this statutory amendment is about keeping Wyoming in the first tier of states for trusts. And I would argue not only trust, but it also gives us an advantage when people are choosing where to domicile their businesses. And I say this because over the last few years, I've been asked to give seminars about our excellent LLC statutes to advisors on the coastal states. And what I ultimately found is that they agree. We arguably have the best LLC statutes in the nation. However, since Nevada is a close second, and they have what is perceived as better trust laws, people are choosing to keep everything under one house, which Nevada is being chosen as that house. So the reason I'm discussing the Fraudulent Transfer Act is because this appears to be the barrier for entry into Wyoming when creating these asset protection trusts. And while Wyoming has always been on the forefront of asset protection laws, our current Fraudulent Transfer Act applies a look-back period that is at least double the length of time for similar matters in other states. The statutory amendment before you is to reduce the current amount of time to bring a claim for relief concerning a fraudulent transfer from 4 years to 2 years after the transfer was made or obligation was incurred, or within 6 months rather than 1 year after a transfer or obligation was or could have been reasonably discovered, which is consistent with other states. Furthermore, when making a transfer to a qualified spendthrift trust or an irrevocable discretionary trust, the look-back period would be reduced to 90 days after notice is given. And the notice must state the name and address of the settlor and the trustee, the assets that were transferred to, an asset protection trust, and that the creditor is required to initiate action within 90 days or their claim is forever barred. If notice isn't given in a general newspaper, in publication, or in circulation in the grantor's county, then a claim for fraudulent transfer could be made within that same 2-year, 6-month look back period as I just previously discussed. So these statutory amendments will continue to keep Wyoming at the forefront when considering asset protection, which is a key factor when individuals are choosing where to domicile their trusts and businesses. And I'm happy to answer any questions that there may be on this bill, and I thank you for your time.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. O'Blasser, 2 questions. The first, I'll do these one at a time. How does this make Wyoming more attractive to businesses?
Thank you for your question. What we've seen is that when clients are choosing where to domicile their trusts, and if they are the type of people looking for an asset protection trust, a lot of times they have businesses that go along with that. And rather than splitting their trusts and businesses between two states, taking Nevada because it has the better trust law, and Wyoming or Delaware because they have the better LLC laws, they say, let's keep it simple. Let's keep everything under Nevada, because Nevada is a close second in LLC laws and in our company statutes. And so that's the biggest barrier I found, is that if there was a shift in our asset protection laws, then advisors would be telling clients to bring everything to Wyoming and housing it here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My second question, please. So, Ms. Oblaster, my second question is, on these look back periods, we basically cut them in half, from 4 years to 2 and 1 year to 6 months. Does that put us in line with other states, make us better, or should we even cut them back further?
Go ahead, Ms. Oblaster. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's a great question, Representative Burkhart. When drafting this bill, I was very conscious about the fact that it's probably already a drastic cut to cut it in half. I think, and this might be my competitive nature, that we could always be a little bit better. But I will say 2 years and 1 year puts us right on track for what other states are doing. And in that context, it appears to be a great amount of time. I've looked at what cases have been brought for fraudulent transfers. There's only been one, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be a key factor when people are considering where to domicile their trusts or their LLCs. What will be is that second piece I talked about. And this is where we are considerably shorter than Nevada and South Dakota, which have the best trust laws considering. And they have it at 2 years and 6 months. We're dropping ours down to 90 days if publication is given. And the only other state that would be in line with us would be Utah, and theirs is 120 days if publication is given. So I think where we need to be competitive, we have been, and it's in that 90-day period if notice is given.
Thank you.
Okay. Committee, any further questions? So I have a couple that may, one, this has no effect on Medicaid planning. Is that correct?
Correct. It should not have an effect on Medicaid planning.
So those look back periods remain in place.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm just trying to anticipate questions that would come from the floor with respect to this. Go ahead, Ms.
If helpful, I was just going to say the Medicaid planning and the look back period there is to consider whether or not people can receive resources from Medicaid. This particular piece is whether or not there's been a fraudulent transfer and in that period of time to a trust to try to get assets outside of your estate to hide it from creditors.
And then I have one more follow-up question again, just in this does not preclude proving there's a fraudulent transfer. What this does is it eliminates these per se timeframes. Am I saying that correctly?
I think so. It reduces the time frames. So if somebody wants to bring a claim that there's been a fraudulent transfer made to an asset protection trust or to a family member, which is what the case that's currently the only case we have in Wyoming about it, they would just have to do it within these time limits, which right now are 4 or at least double other states. And I don't think give people closure once a transfer is made that they're not looking over their shoulder for 4 years.
Okay. And then one more question with respect, so the notice to the creditors, right? And that's mailed, because you had said published, and I just want to make sure the committee understands. We're talking about mailing a notice directly to the creditor, right?
Excellent distinction. If there's a known creditor, the notice will have to be mailed to that creditor, much like in a probate or trust administration. For future creditors where somebody's transferring an asset and they may have creditors in the future, they don't know who it would be, they would have to do also a publication, a notice publication.
Right. Okay. Committee, that spur any other questions? Okay. All right. Mr. Meyer, did you have any comments on behalf of your organization?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association. And a little bit, I will tell you also on behalf of myself as a practicing attorney. that does this kind of stuff. I will agree with everything that Ms. Oblasser said, and as well as Mr. Leonard. I think these are great additions to Wyoming statutes, and they do help with the estate planning process. But from the standpoint of the Wyoming Bankers Association, I'll let you know that we looked at this thing from the standpoint of how does that really affect us. And I think going back to at least a question that Representative Burkhart had brought in, does this really help? Does it do whatever? And I'm just going to say generally, this stuff, this does help our industry. It helps banking division, trust divisions of these banks to do what they need to do. And I just say that from a general standpoint, the chairman of our trust committee for the Wyoming Bankers Association is Ms. Barber, who's on the conference, and I'll let her explain that a little bit more, but we stand in complete support of this bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any questions for Mr. Meyer? Okay, then we'll, Ms. Barber, welcome.
Thank you, Representative Greer, or Chairman Greer and representatives. Yes, Scott and I had a conversation about this earlier. On the trust side, we've worked for years, Bob and Mike and I and several attorneys, to make sure that, as Marty said, we have the best trust laws to bring in the business and the competition. And we constantly out there get in publications and things out there say, well, Wyoming's second place because of this, this, and this. So it really does help. And one of the conversations I had with Scott was the fact that within the last 5 years, we actually, as a trust department at Wyoming Bank and Trust, are really seeing the difference in business coming from other states. We have tons of clients that we do situs trustee and all kinds of different services for them from all over the country. So I would say within the last 5 years, these changes have definitely helped our trust department, which we think is great. So yes, absolutely. We're, totally in favor of this because it does help all of us in the trust industry.
Yep. Any questions for Ms. Barber? Richie, appreciate seeing you. Okay, anybody, any other comment from the group, I think? Okay. I'll go ahead and close public testimony. What's the committee's pleasure?
Move the bill.
Okay, moved by Sherwood. Is there a second?
Second.
Representative Burkhart. You don't always get to move every bill, Representative Burkhart.
I didn't think I did. I didn't hear that, so.
Okay, good enough. So, committee, again, people ask, why are these in the Minerals Committee? Well, it's Minerals Business and Economic Development. And yeah, this could be on Judiciary, but this is a little known, although we're trying to get the message out a bit more. This is truly a diversification of our economy, and it's growing and it's working. It's part of that economic development and done so in a way that doesn't cost us anything. So it's a good thing. So, okay, so committee, any comments or discussion on the bill? Or are you ready to work it? Representative Bear, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just a simple man and I don't really quite understand what the opposing view would be on this bill. So I'd really like anybody that can answer that for me to just give me the answer as to who is going to be possibly damaged by shortening these timeframes. I assume it's somebody that's going to be saying that this is a fraudulent transfer, but just expound on that so that I've got a better understanding of who might be hurt by these changes.
So, Ms. Oblasser, I'll let you come back in and address that directly, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bear, I have also tried to consider that same question, did a lot of research, looked at other cases, looked at our state, looked at other states, and you're spot on. It would be a person who has a creditor's claim that their time frame gets shortened. And like I said, I don't think this is going to be a huge concern in Wyoming because we currently only have one case with our Fraudulent Transfers Act, where it was applicable in the lawsuit. In the middle of a lawsuit, husband and wife tried to transfer their assets outside of their estate to hide them from the creditors of the current lawsuit. And then I looked at Utah's, and they didn't have any creditors for their Transfers Act either. So if somebody were to be hurt by it, it would be a creditor that they would have to bring their claims in a shortened amount of time.
Does that help you, Representative Bear?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions, committee? Okay, you're ready to work the bill then? So this one's short enough. We'll go ahead and we're a little clean. We're back in the normal process here. So with respect to page 1. Page 2. Page 3. 4. And page 5. Okay, any further discussions on the bill? Okay, seeing none. Sensing you're ready to vote. Okay, question being called. Cindy, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Representative Bear.
Aye.
Representative Burkhart.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Bear has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Gray.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Western.
Aye.
And Chairman Greer.
Aye.
Thanks. That leaves us 9 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, thank you, committee. Okay, so the next bill for our discussion then is the Senate File 68, which are some cleanup amendments to the Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act. I believe Chris Reimer is available to walk us through this and maybe answer the general question, what is a statutory foundation for our committee?
Good morning. This is Chris Reimer. Can you see and hear me okay, Chairman Greer?
We can, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a second, Chris. Hey, Cindy, we're getting a little bit of feedback from your microphone. I hate to have you turn it off with the difficulties we're having, but.
Chairman Greer, it was off. I wonder if that isn't something LSO can look into.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Reimer. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Reimer. I'm a practicing attorney in Wyoming, going on 17 years now with the firm of Long, Reimer, Weiniger. The main office is in Cheyenne. I happen to be in Jackson. The reason I'm here today is to just describe for you House Bill 68, the amendments to the Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act. As a general matter, the Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act was enacted 2 years ago in 2019. And the impetus for these suggested changes are solely based on actually having the opportunity to work with the act in real life with real foundations for the last 2 years. And I'm happy to get into the nitty-gritty of any of them, but I will just say generally they are cleanup items, definitional, internal references, things that didn't make sense. And to give you a little more background on that, I would be happy to just describe what the Statutory Foundation Act is all about. It is a amalgamation of pieces of legislation from trust law, corporate law, LLC law, to allow for the creation of an entity under Wyoming law called a statutory foundation. And very much in line with previous testimony with respect to the Fraudulent Conveyance Act timing and all of the little items that Bob Leonard will talk about in the trust code, the fact that Wyoming has a Wyoming Statutory Foundation is intentional in trying to be in the top tier of jurisdictions for both trust and entity planning. A statutory foundation is like an LLC or a corporation in that somebody goes to the Wyoming Secretary of State and pays $100 to form it, just like any other entity, and then pays another $50 a year to maintain it in place as long as it exists. the operations of a foundation are not necessarily charitable, but in just, if you were to hear the term foundation in the US, typically when someone uses the term, it does mean a charitable entity, and a Wyoming statutory foundation can be both charitable or non-charitable. And when you look at a statutory foundation in comparison with all the other entities that you could have in Wyoming, LLCs, corporations, charities, charitable trusts, just regular common law trusts, a statutory foundation is a blend of what we think of as a common law trust and an entity like a corporation. And I guess I'll stop there. Pause there in case there's that, just to test the audience to see if I'm still have everybody, or if I should go back.
So yeah, Representative Western has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reimer, so statutory foundation, it's a type of LLC in the sense that you go to the Secretary of State and you kind of incorporate it, but can it sue and be sued in the court of law? Can it open and close bank accounts, things of that nature?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. So, Mr. Reimer, I think, you know, a little bit of that overview was good. 2 years ago, we pushed this through, and maybe just a little bit of a comment. Is this being utilized? Are you finding this to be a useful tool in your practice or other practitioners in your area?
Yes. So personally, I'm aware of about 20 that have been organized since the inception of the Act. I'm aware of many more that are kind of in the pipeline. Similar to how a point that I should make is that this specific entity in the United States is currently only authorized under New Hampshire and Wyoming law. So New Hampshire was the first, Wyoming is the second. There are others that are currently in the process of enacting it. Similar to how I understand the evolution of the LLC occurred, which was before my time as a lawyer, but certainly during the time of our senior partner, Tom Long, at the firm. Similarly, we expect it will take a few more states to adopt it before we see a more critical mass of filings. But we want to be at the forefront of that and be able to win. Our jurisdiction is ranked among all the jurisdictions as the best place to do business, the best opportunities for flexibility in setting up structures. We want to be in that first tier. And this is all part and parcel to that. And as a practical matter, it doesn't say trust in the name, but it is trusts companies in the state of Wyoming who will be the entity that manages a foundation similar to they act as trusts for trustees, and they are today. So this might not seem like, by virtue of having this entity called the Wyoming Statutory Foundation, as something that will be a shot in the arm for even more activity for trust companies, but it absolutely will.
Okay. Yeah, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. So, Mr. Reimer, so I'm still kind of having a tough time really grasping what's the legitimate advantage of this. You know, if I can create a trust and the many different types of those, or a trust company, and if I want to store my real or personal assets, whether it be an LLC, in a trust, or any kind of other custodial vehicle, if you will, what is the real kind of competitive edge that a statutory foundation would have over some of the already existing vehicles for some of these assets and for ownership of and operation of these assets?
So
yeah, go ahead.
Acts like a trust. So to answer your question, most people that would be looking at this as an alternative would be looking as an alternative to a trust. The primary difference is that a trustee has an inviolate duty to living, breathing beneficiaries. So that is a common law concept that comes to us from England. And by virtue of the fact that our country used to be England, if you have a trust, The person who's in charge of the property, the trustee, has a duty to carry out activities for the beneficiaries. With a foundation, fundamentally different from the common law concept of a trust, is that the managers who carry out the foundation, their primary duty is to the founder and the founder's intent and purposes for establishing it, not the beneficiaries that might be alive 100 years from now. Their primary duty is to carry out what the founder envisioned from the beginning.
So, does that help, Representative Western? I kind of have an example from my own real life of where we use an LLC to manage assets, but you have LLC law, which is not the reason the assets were put in were to benefit a group of people. So then you have trusts below that. And there's this inherent conflict that you have of managing a business or managing a trust. They're not always the same, but there's a great deal of overlap with it. And so, Mr. Reimer, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this helps merge that together so you can blend and get rid of some of those conflicts and move forward with the true intent of those people that started it or founded it. Is that a good synopsis?
That's an excellent example, and the nuance there is that there still are duties to beneficiaries, but the primary purpose would be to carry out what the initial founder of the foundation wanted. So if it was to, as an example, if it was to carry on a particular activity on a piece of real estate, as you say, if you had members in an LLC that owned that real estate and the dad who established the structure died and the kids all said, dad was off his rocker. We're not going to hold this for mineral development. We're going to sell it right now. The manager in charge of the foundation would say, wait a minute, kids, my job is not to do what you want now that dad's gone. My job is to continue what dad said. And he thought we should hold this for mineral development. And that's what we're going to do. And he could be sued, but the kids would lose. In a trust, the kids can always generally get a hook with respect to a trustee if they can prove that the trustee's doing something that would somehow harm the beneficiaries. But in the case of a foundation, much more about, is the manager carrying out what the founder intended from the get-go?
Does that help, Representative Western? You're holding your head like it hurts. Does that help?
Mr. Chairman, my head is always hurting. I thought that there was ample case law and also tools in the toolbox, if you will, of someone who is setting up a trust, whether it be, the many different types of trust mechanisms, so that the trust can be executed and its assets be managed in a way that is consistent with the intention of the founder. I mean, I think, there's ample examples of that out there that kind of back that up. And so this is just one more level of security to make sure that the founder's intention and the document it promulgates ensures that it adheres to the original design intention of the trust. Is that what I'm hearing?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. I can confirm you are correct that there are tools to be used in the trust realm to try to do something similar to what a foundation would do, but there is an inherent conflict between beneficial rights and a trustee's duties that just wouldn't apply in the situation of a foundation. And the only other thing that I would mention is that the Chairman Greer said that you were holding your head and your head hurts. This concept of a foundation is not something that we're used to dealing with in a so-called common law jurisdiction. This concept is actually used throughout the world, but it comes from places that don't have trusts, places that were not England. It comes from places that were French, German, Dutch. So it's something that in the US, it's not commonly used and hasn't been commonly used like trusts have, but it is, in the way that the world is working, and we want to be able to have everything and every option. This is just one more option. That's, I would imagine within 10 years, there'll be every jurisdiction that attempts to be a trust and estate jurisdiction, tier 1 through 3 will have a statutory foundation act.
Yep. All right. So, Mr. Reimer, that's a good overview and a good discussion. Go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I wasn't on the committee on 2019 when this was passed, and when it came to the floor, I had a lot of questions. And anyway, later on, someone and it comports, Mr. Reimer, with what you laid out as why someone would want this. Someone imparted a concern to me that these sorts of things are going to be used for conservation easements, and I've always been concerned with those. I think locking up an asset perpetually, you think about one of the main economic, it's capital land. I mean, you think about the production inputs, land's one of the main production inputs. And so I've always been uncomfortable with the concept of locking up land perpetually. And someone raised that concern to me, and I wanted to ask you, from what you just described, it does appear to comport with that structure is conducive to a conservation easement, it appears. And I respect, Representative Greer's worked, Chairman Greer's worked a lot on these issues, but I just want to understand this. And so I did want to ask that question because someone had raised that concern to me about a year ago on these. So thank you.
Good, Mr. Reimer.
So a statutory foundation could presumably own land and have a so-called conservation easement imposed upon that land. But the existence of a statutory foundation as an option doesn't change anything with the general rule under Wyoming law that land can be restricted by an easement perpetually, whether it's owned by people, living, breathing people who live and die and pass it on, or trusts, charitable trusts under Wyoming law, which last forever, LLCs, which last forever, limited partnerships, which can last 100 years. The element that you're asking about this, whether land can be burdened and impaired by a charitable easement, absolutely nothing changes with respect to that fact under Wyoming law with respect to a statutory foundation. This isn't a mechanism to somehow create charitable easements that doesn't already exist.
Any follow-up, Representative Gray? Does that get your question? Okay. So any further general questions of the committee? Then, a great deal of this, Mr. Reimer, is sort of structures on words and definition on beneficial interests and the difference between organizer and, allowing an attorney to be an organizer but not a founder and some of those things. Do you want to hit the high points of any, substantive amendments?
Chairman Greer, I would tell you that none of them are substantive and that they are all absolutely based on working and reading the statute and realizing that a reference just didn't make sense or could be clarified. And that's exactly what we're doing here.
I didn't see any that were substantive when I went through it myself. Committee, do you want to walk through each one of the amendments, or are you any questions? Comfortable with it? Kind of overwhelm you with this type of stuff. Sorry. Okay, I'm getting that look. Mr. Reimer, any further comments on this?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishes to comment? Representative Burkhart, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I might. So just so I'm clear, Mr. Reimer, some of this and some of the amendments come from actual working experience under the previous act, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Reimer, sorry, I did have one question in it, and it's really, I don't know if you've got the bill in front of you, but it's on page 10, and just a little bit of an explanation of the issue of being, or the practice of maybe issuing shares. So I understand that this could be unitized, and then shares could be issued to persons. I guess I was just a little bit on that, how that would work in practice, please.
Sure. So similar to if the foundation were to run or be operated like an LLC, which under the rules governing the creation of it, it's entirely up to the drafts person, whether the interests are more like an irrevocable trust where it's not something you have necessarily have a share interest in, but a beneficial interest under the law. This would allow for, if it were a for-profit company under the Foundation Act, to go ahead and issue shares like are found in a membership interest and found in a limited liability company. And not to muddy the waters and blow everyone's mind, but there already exists another entity out there called a statutory trust. Wyoming has statutory trusts, and so do a handful of jurisdictions in the US. They come from what are so-called Massachusetts business trusts. And so to give these provisions are essentially copied from the statutory trust code to allow a foundation, if it wants to have actual issued membership interest, to do so.
Okay. So then, and I understand that, so it's a difference between owning 25% or 250 shares, same thing. But one of the questions is, what is a scenario where a person isn't a beneficiary and would receive shares? That was, maybe that's what my first question really was.
Typically, if you hold shares, I think you would be a beneficiary. So whether, I'm not sure I understand your question, but once you hold shares under of a foundation, I think you would be a beneficiary of that foundation. And
so
it would be a gift from a parent to a child, not necessarily something that you put into it.
And I'm sorry, I'm violating my own rules, Mr. Chairman. On page 10, though, it talks about a person may receive units or shares without being or becoming a beneficiary, acquiring any rights or duties of a beneficiary, or being obligated to make contribution. Well, I understand to make contributions.
Yes, I'm sorry. So this is what you just described would be the same thing as having a profits interest in a partnership. So this is allowing the severance from having an underlying equitable interest and a profits interest. So this person could have a share which would only carry with it a profits interest, but not be an economic underlying owner of the company. So for example, the easiest example I use with people when I'm describing a profits interest in a partnership is a law firm. When you become a partner in a law firm, you may have a percentage interest, but it would be only with respect to a little bit of the income, and it could have zero of the capital of the law firm. On the day one when you buy in, unless you have a bunch of cash to actually get an underlying cash membership interest of the law firm, you would have only a profits interest. So to be not a beneficiary but have a unit, you wouldn't have any interest in the cash or the underlying capital of the foundation. You would have only an interest in the profits interest.
Okay.
So that has a specific business purpose if this were to be operated as a business, not what we would think of as a common law trust.
All right, thank you. Representative Western, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So basically, it's not to mix metaphors and industries. It's basically a royalty override. I don't own any of the underlying asset, but I own some of the revenue it generates. Fair enough?
Representative or Mr. Reimer? Yeah.
No, not being a oil and gas attorney whatsoever, but having partners that are and pick up on it a little bit, I am comfortable saying yes. I think that would be a reasonable corollary.
Okay. Okay. Committee, any further questions? Okay, is there anybody else wishes to comment or testify on this? Scott or Dershey, any comments? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Chairman Greer and members of the committee. I listened very carefully to what Mr. Reimer has to say, and we don't have any dispute with that. We think that he did a very good job of explaining it and really stand in support of these changes to the statute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else, any further comments? Okay, we'll close public testimony, but Mr. Reimer, if you just hang tight in case anything comes up as we work the bill, I'd appreciate that. So this will be one of those long explanations on the floor for me, and I'm sure every JD who's a representative will have questions for me. So you'll be able to go get a cup of coffee. I can see that now. Okay. What's the committee's pleasure with the bill? Representative Sherwood, do you want to? Representative Burkhart moved the bill. Is there a second? Moved by Representative Western. Okay. Committee, any general discussion on it? Again, like I said, I've been through it. I had the one substantive questions for Mr. Reimer, but the rest are cleanup and just clarification. And I recall doing this 2 years ago. We tried to translate this from, I think it was Delaware. Is that correct? And trying to get that into the form of Wyoming law took a little bit of work. And what we're getting right now is just a cleanup of some terms for the most part. Any questions? Ready to work through the bill? I'll just say here, I guess, are there any amendments or any questions, period? I can go through page by page, but. I think with that sense, are you ready to vote? Okay. Cindy, are you ready to take a roll call for us?
I'm ready. Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Duncan,
Aye.
Representative Bear submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Gray,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Sherwood,
Aye.
Representative Western,
Aye.
and Chairman Greer.
Aye.
Results are 9 ayes.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gray, you want to floor manage this or you want me to just take it?
Thanks, Chairman Greer. You go ahead and take that. Thank you.
I will. Okay, good enough. All right, committee. Hey, we'll keep moving here. The next one then is House Bill 104. Mr. Leonard, I think you're going to walk us through that. So let me get that pulled up. Okay, Mr. Leonard, if you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Greer, members of the Minerals Committee. I think it might be helpful to give you just a little bit of background on Asset Protection Trust in Wyoming before we start working through this. Not all states in the United States have what we call domestic asset protection trusts. In virtually every state in the United States, if you create a trust for your child or your grandchild and you contribute property to it, and you define in that trust they're only entitled to certain types of distributions from the trust, a creditor cannot seize that child's interest or force a distribution to that child to seize an interest. In about 20 states in the United States, we have what's called self-settled asset protection trusts. And that's where you create a trust for yourself, contribute your property to it. And if you comply with all the statutory provisions for that trust, you have protection from your creditors as long as you did not make a fraudulent transfer to that trust. Wyoming is one of those states, and we have two types of self-settled or domestic asset protection trust. We have the trust that's called the Qualified Spendthrift Trust, and we have a discretionary asset protection trust where you are only entitled to discretionary distributions from the trust from an unrelated trustee, somebody who's not subordinate to you, not related to you, once you've transferred property to the trust. So with that background, then I'm going to go forward now into the changes we're making to the Uniform Trust Code. And that first change is to add a new provision, 507.1. And the reason we're adding this is we're trying to stay competitive with states like South Dakota, Nevada, Alaska. And South Dakota recently had a situation where they considered this issue, and actually their Supreme Court decided it for them. But we think that we ought to have it in our statutes. And I've been in contact with attorneys from California and New York who are actually moving trusts to Wyoming. And they were looking at Wyoming and South Dakota and said, well, this is the only thing we see that's different between Wyoming and South Dakota. So what we're doing here is we're saying, if you're a Wyoming judge and you've got a creditor's judgment from another state that is being brought into Wyoming for enforcement, and that other state doesn't have an asset protection trust like Wyoming does, the judge needs to stop for a minute and say, wait a minute, can I enforce this judgment in Wyoming when it is in violation of what occurs under Wyoming law? Because a Wyoming creditor could not enforce this against this trust. Should I allow this foreign creditor to come in and enforce it against this Wyoming asset protection trust? And what we're saying is no. The judge needs to consider Wyoming law in deciding whether to enforce this foreign creditor's judgment. It must be a claim that would be enforceable under Wyoming law and consistent with the terms of the trust. What do we mean by consistent with the terms of the trust? Well, the trust terms could be more lenient than what Wyoming law says with respect to asset protection trust. And if they are more lenient, well, then the judge can consider that the terms are more lenient and maybe is able to enforce that judgment. So that's basically what 507 is about.
Committee, any questions on that? I believe it or not, and it's been a while. I'm a recovering attorney, but I have had clients who would actually look at Forbes magazine or what else, and they would say, you know what, in South Dakota, we have this protection we don't in Wyoming. We would prefer our trust be located in South Dakota. And I did practice law in South Dakota, so I gave them the name of an attorney in South Dakota. So, okay, go ahead, Bob.
Well, in the second part of 507, which is B, is basically that it's liability protection for the trustee, the trust protector, the trust advisor of this trust. If they refuse to allow the enforcement of this foreign judgment, enforce the creditor to go to the Wyoming court. And that's similar to what we provided in our UTC provisions 517 and 518, which are provisions if you create an asset protection trust and you're the lawyer that helps create it, or you help fund it, and you've complied with Wyoming law for the creation of this trust, you're not liable to a creditor of the person who created the trust just because you helped them create that trust. So that's the two parts of 507.
Okay. Any questions, committee? This saves you as a practitioner from having your cell phone subpoenaed. I've been through that.
The Second Amendment is to 105. Now, 105 is an important part of the Uniform Trust Code because 105 is the part of the trust code that says you can create your trust and put it in anything you want except what 105 says. Okay? 105 is the mandatory provisions that your trust provisions cannot countermand. And in 105, there's what is called the beneficiary benefit rule. The beneficiary benefit rule actually is a new development in trust law coming out of the Restatement of Trust Third and then shifted into the standard Uniform Trust Code as it was drafted originally by the drafters in this national organization called NACUSL, okay? And it says basically the primary purpose of a trust is for the benefit of the beneficiary. Under the common law, there was a balance between the benefit of the beneficiary and the desires of the grantor. So what happened here is the Uniform Trust Code changed that balance. And there are some trusts that are not for the benefit of the beneficiary. There are trusts that are used like we call a GRAT, which is a grantor retained annuity trust. I understand that's kind of complex, but it's a trust that was set up by a grantor with the intent of passing on to his children or grandchildren a reduced gift value by the grantor retaining an income interest. So the real benefit of that trust was gift tax purposes. It was really not for a specific benefits of the beneficiary. And technically that trust could violate the beneficiary benefit rule. So what's happened here is a bunch of states have deleted this beneficiary benefit rule from their Uniform Trust Code. We followed a little bit different approach. We followed New Hampshire's approach, which basically says we didn't take out that clause entirely out of 105 because 105 in almost every trust code, Uniform Trust Code, is the same provision. It may have a little bit different number, but it follows the national NACUSL provision. So what we've done is said, we're not completely eliminating the beneficiary benefit rule, but we're limiting it to the interest of the beneficiaries as defined under the terms of the trust. So if the beneficiaries' interest under the trust are limited by the terms of the trust, then there isn't a beneficiary benefit rule that overcomes the trust terms.
Okay, committee, all right.
There was a second part to the amendment to 105 because we had recently seen some trusts, the committee, where a trust protector or advisor was appointed for the trust, and they were giving duties that were normally a trustee's duties. That same trust document said that trust protector or advisor was not a trust fiduciary. And then the same document said the trustee was an excluded fiduciary with respect to the powers of the trust protector and advisor. And if you work your way through that sequence, you come to the realization we've got some significant duties in this trust and nobody is a fiduciary with respect to them. Wait a minute, what's going to happen here? How can these fiduciary duties be enforced if there's no fiduciary? So what the Second Amendment to 105 says that if that situation occurs, the trust protector advisor will be a fiduciary to the extent they're granted powers and duties, and the trustee is an excluded fiduciary as to those duties. Well, we had some people reach out to us when they saw this amendment and said, oops, we don't want our trust protector advisor to be a fiduciary. And I said, well, that's simple. All you have to do is say, the trustee still has this fiduciary responsibility then. You can't have it both ways. You can say the trust protector advisor is not a fiduciary, but then you can't turn around and say the trustee's not a fiduciary either. So what this provision does then is adds a mandatory provision under 105 that somebody's got to be a fiduciary.
And Bob, I just want to make sure we got the language correct on that. That was tricky language.
It was tricky language. It's difficult, I think, for LSO sometimes to understand the intricacies of trust law. And yeah, we had to go back and say the LSO draft was not what we intended.
Right.
But the language is correct now. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think I had a hand in screwing up the first draft. So
I'll
take responsibility.
Well, it's a difficult concept to try to put all these things together. Right? So our next amendment is to 107, which is the governing law provision of the Uniform Trust Code. And that provides that Wyoming law governs the meaning and effect of trust terms, and a trust will not be void and defective, what we're saying in our amendment, if the law or public policy of a foreign jurisdiction does not recognize or limits the validity or enforceability of the terms of the trust, if the terms are valid and enforceable under Wyoming law. So this is kind of going along the same lines as 507. We're saying just because this trust in Wyoming, which has asset protection trust, is not valid in Colorado, doesn't mean it's not valid in Wyoming.
So, Mr. Leonard, I did have a question on this on line 5. Okay, so I'm fine with public policy being on line 9, but on line 5, is this stronger if we strike the or public policy?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood your question, Chairman Greer.
Yeah, so on line 5, it says that the law or public policy of a foreign jurisdiction. Well, public policy is more difficult to understand sitting in Wyoming. Is this clearer and cleaner if it were to say the law of a foreign jurisdiction and strike the or public policy?
No, because I'm actually dealing with a case in Colorado right now where under Colorado public policy, asset protection trusts are not recognized. I mean, there's not a statute that says we don't in Colorado recognize asset protection trust. It's the public policy of the state of Colorado that asset protection trust for self-settled asset protection trust should not be applied in Colorado, okay? And that public policy comes out of some case law. It doesn't come from a statute, okay?
Yeah. Right.
And in Wyoming, our public policy is, yes, asset protection trusts exist. It was the desire of the legislature that we have asset protection trusts, and our UTC provides for them. I believe there was a question from Representative Duncan.
Yeah, Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of clarification definitions for me. One is, what is the legit, how do you say it? Legitime, Legitime. It's on page 5, line 2. What is that? And then second is my clarification on forced heirship. Is this from what we learned, was it last year, a year before, where it's someone is from out of country and they have an heirship and then they are petitioning and so that they can't come to Wyoming, where it's like an illegitimate child or a second marriage or something along those lines, and those are the trying to petition for heirship. Is that the definition I'm remembering correctly? So if you could just clarify those two things for me.
Go ahead. Wait, I think we discussed that the last time in session. But go ahead, Mr. Leonard. Yeah.
Chairman Greer, Representative Duncan. I'll give you an example. My wife is Spanish, and we just went through a probate in Spain. And in Spain, you cannot disinherit a child, okay? And there's issues occasionally arise where when an estate includes both Spanish property and US property, does that forced heirship carry over to the US property? And this legitime is also a civil law right. It's not a common law right, like forced heirship is also a common or a civil law right. It's not a common law right. We have one state in the United States, Louisiana, where there's a form of forced heirship because of the French civil law that is kind of blended into their statutory provisions. But you're right. These two references were designed back in I believe in the 2019 amendments to prevent somebody from trying to enforce a foreign judgment under the theory of legitime or forced heirship against property in a Wyoming trust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just trying to make sure that I remembered it correctly and that I was putting all the pieces together.
We're not going to recognize Napoleonic law in Wyoming. So, okay. Go ahead, Mr. Leonard. Okay, I think you're.
We're now going to go on to 108, which is the principal place of administration statute. And we've made some changes there. We're trying to make it easier under 108 to move trusts to Wyoming and bring them under Wyoming jurisdiction so that the law of Wyoming applies to the administration of that trust. And what we've done here is to provide some clarification in a addition to 108F that first of all, Wyoming law will govern the administration of a trust for which the principal place of administration of the trust is Wyoming, or the principal administration has been changed to Wyoming. And then the last provision is kind of a series of things designed to allow a trustee to move it to Wyoming under trust administration, even though the trust may say that the law of another state applies, okay? So even though the law of the trust or the trust provisions say that the law of another state will be the principal place of administration, if the law specifies that the principal place of administration other than Wyoming governs administration of a trust, and even if it expressly prohibits a change in the choice of law of the administration of the trust, and expressly states a change in the choice of the law is prohibited, it has to have all three of these things before the trustee cannot move it to Wyoming. And this actually follows an Alaska statute where they recently changed. And what we're trying to do here, as I said at the offset, is make it easier for the trustee of a trust that was created in another state that says the law of that other state applies to move that trust to Wyoming, move it with Dershey Barber at Wyoming Bank and Trust, or Bob Liebrecht at First Interstate Bank in Sheridan, and get past those hurdles that would seem to prevent it being moved to Wyoming.
So that, Mr. Leonard, this is for trust created after the effective date of this amendment. Is that?
Well, that's actually in 1103, which we're going to discuss a little bit later.
Okay, so because that and on line 13 is powerful.
That is the powerful part of this. And initially there was a question of whether that should be an or. And I went back to the drafter of it, and the drafter said, no. It's got to be and, because that's what Alaska is, and we got to be competitive with Alaska here. And I agree. Alaska is one of our main competitors. And if Alaska is sucking in trusts from other states, we should be able to grab some of these trusts from other states too. And we should not be in a disadvantage with Alaska in this area.
Okay.
Directed trust, 718. Okay. And in 718 kind of ties in with 105. You know, when we were talking about 105, we were saying we had these problems with trusts that didn't have any fiduciaries. Okay, so subsection A of 105, the change, provides that if we have a trust protector or advisor and they're performing fiduciary duties and the trustee is required to follow those fiduciary duties, And the trust provides that the trustee is an excluded fiduciary, which means they don't have fiduciary responsibilities for those duties, then the trust protector or the advisor has to become a fiduciary. That's what the change to 107A. And the reason we've done this both in 105, in 718A, is that unless it states that in 105, the terms of the trust could override 718A. Change it to 718B and C. This was a surprise because we took 718 from Delaware law at the time we did it. I think it was back, I want to say maybe 2007. But we didn't notice at that time that there was kind of a defect in the language of both B and C under 718, because the current language seems to say that if a person has the authority to appoint a trust advisor or a trust protector for a trust, they are also a trust protector and trust advisor. And that means that they are also probably a fiduciary. So that's kind of a problem, because if somebody creates a trust and reserves in it the right to appoint a trust protector or advisor for that trust, you're the grantor of the trust, you created it, you reserved the right to appoint these people. You don't want to be a fiduciary of that trust that you just created, but this statute would appear to make you a fiduciary of that trust. So what the amendments clarify is the appointed person, not the person who has the authority to make the appointment, becomes the fiduciary, because the trust protector or the trust advisor that you appoint is the fiduciary, not you who had the authority to make the appointment. And some trusts also provide beneficiaries with the authority to make an appointment of a trust protector or trust advisor. We don't want those beneficiaries to be a fiduciary of that trust. So I don't know how we overlooked this when this was done originally, but it was pointed out to us by someone and we said, oops, this is not what we intended. And I haven't gone back and looked at the most recent Delaware statute to see if they fixed this, but we took the language from the Delaware statute back when we did this. The amendment to 802 complements 105 again, the beneficiary benefit rule. I talked about that. We do not want the beneficiary benefit rule to be the overriding rule in Wyoming. So we have made this change to 802 also. Following the New Hampshire solution, the interest of the beneficiary in the trust governs what benefits the beneficiary is entitled under the trust. The 8-14 change, back in 2019, we made a change to 505D. And that change was that unless the trust states so, the trustee in making distributions to a beneficiary is not required to consider the beneficiary's other resources. Now, those of us who draft trusts, if we want the trustee to consider that child beneficiary, grandchild beneficiary, or spouse beneficiaries other resources in making distributions, we specify that. But if we don't specify it, then the trustee is kind of in a quandary. Do I have to consider them? Or do I not have to consider them? So we now have kind of a black letter rule in the Uniform Trust Code with 505D, and we didn't notice 814 when we did the 505D change. So now they're consistent with this amendment. The final amendments are to 1103. Back in 2003, when we passed the Uniform Trust Code, it was thought to be such a change in trust law in Wyoming that the legislature did not want to apply it retroactively. So it only applied to trusts created after July 1 in 2003, because it was passed in 2003. What we've done with this amendment to 1103E is say, okay, we're not changing that basic principle, but if somebody's changing the principal place of administration to Wyoming, we went through in 108, we're making that more lenient to try to get more people to change their principal place of administration to Wyoming. We want the law of the trust code to apply to those trusts, even if that trust was created in Colorado before 2003, or it was created somewhere else before 2003. Someday, maybe we will apply the trust code to all trusts without this provision limiting the retroactivity. Personally, I believe that the Uniform Trust Code was not that dramatic of a change from trust law in Wyoming prior to 2003 that it would make any difference. And I'm finding that what's happening in court cases, I'm familiar with a number of them, the judge is saying, okay, I realize that this trust was created before 2003, but the first thing I'm looking at is the trust code as to these provisions, because I don't think the trust code is much different than what the law was before. And I can understand the trust code without having to go back and try to put together pieces of a number of cases. So what's happening is the judges are applying the trust code to trust created before 2003. And then in a number of other cases, what's happening is before they go to court, the first thing they're doing is agreeing that the trust code applies in their pleadings, even though the trust was created before 2003. Or they're entering into a non-judicial settlement agreement that says the trust code applies, even though the trust was created before 2003. Are there any questions on 1103?
Yep. Committee, any questions? So I can see I'm interested, but everybody else is bored. So it's okay.
I'm sorry, trusts are boring.
Well, we also deal with banking laws here too. So it all in good order. We all have our cross to bear. Okay, well, any questions for Mr. Leonard? Thank you. Great explanation. Anyone else wishes to comment on the proposed legislation? Okay, I'm not seeing. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public testimony. Mr. Leonard, if you hang tight, just in case there are any more from the committee. Committee, what's your pleasure, I guess, first of all?
Move the bill.
Okay, moved by Representative Heiner. Is there a second? Okay, I got a second from Representative Bear. Okay. Committee, any discussion? Any questions on this? Again, probably glad I'll be explaining it. So, okay. Do we need to work the bill line by line or page by page, or are we ready to go move on? Okay. Anyone call question? Question being called. Cindy, you ready for a roll call vote?
Yes, Representative Bear.
Aye.
Representative Burkhart.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Bear has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Gray.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Western.
Aye.
And Chairman Greer.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Cindy. Hopefully they don't have all these back to back for us, or if they do, it's around 2:30 in the afternoon on the floor. So, okay. Well, Mr. Leonard, thank you. That was a great explanation. I appreciate you getting the line up to answer the questions, and we appreciate the hard work your committee is doing to keep Wyoming competitive in this area and doing your part to stimulate the economy. Thank you.
Well, and Chairman Greer, I appreciate you taking the lead on this. I think this is what, the third or fourth year you've done this for us?
I think so. Because I'm a recovering attorney, and I keep getting further and further away, we may have to pass the baton next time. So we'll discuss.
Well, thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Carla, I think committee, do you want to take a quick 5-minute break? We've got one more bill that I hope doesn't take very long for us, but let's take a break. So why don't we come back here? It's 11:22. Let's come back at 11:30. Let's go ahead, Carla, and let the banking division in, and we'll tackle House Bill 69 and wrap up for the day. You know, Don, you've been on minerals for 4 years?
Well, third year.
Okay. Yeah, but people are always excited to get on the minerals committee, and then they realize that we deal with some like the Uniform Consumer Credit Code and the Trust Company Act and some of those things, and it's a little more dull than they realize. So.
Well, you know, the nice thing, Bob Leonard does just a great job of explaining some of this so that you can understand it. I remember his testimony from when we considered that last bill the last time, and some of that discussion. I think he just does a great job of explaining it to, you know, non-legal trained people.
Yeah. No, he does a good job, and I said I'm now five years removed from practicing law, but practiced in that area, and it was amazing how many times it would come up. I mean, clients actually bring a Forbes magazine or print out an article and say, we want our trust to be in South Dakota had been real popular towards the end, but we want our trust to be in Nevada because, you know, we want this to be for our children to be protected for X number of years or stuff. So what they're doing is being responsive. So it's good.
Yeah. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
Wait, how many total different types of trusts are there in Wyoming statute?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that question. You know, we have statutory trust, and then when you get to the trust code, there are several different types of trusts that are referenced, and the names of trusts, a lot of them follow or take names that are associated with what's allowed under the Internal Revenue Code. Quite frankly, it's what you end up calling those by. You know, generation skipping trust or charitable remainder trust or grantor retained annuity trust. There's just, you know, qualified domestic relations trust. There's a lot of those names are kind of driven by what's dictated by the Internal Revenue Code, I think. So the Uniform Trust Code, pretty handy. Okay, so we're waiting on Representative Duncan and Sherwood. Why don't we can get, is Commissioner Faulkner available? We'll get him up on the screen, or his group. Okay, there's Representative Sherwood. Okay. Commissioner Faulkner, good to see you. I'm going to go ahead then. If we're back in, we'll bring the meeting back to order. I'll do the lead in on House Bill 69, and then we'll get the commission's banking division's comments, and then comments from whomever else is out there. So House Bill 69 probably should have been a committee bill this interim. It just came around. I couldn't get it set for us quick enough. And what this really comes down to, there's nothing wrong that's been going on. As a matter of fact, the commission's been, and these questions were asked during the interim. You know, they established their rules and their fees through the rulemaking process, which are subject to the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act. What came to light as we were looking through some of this is that we weren't crystal clear in some of the areas where we have, where statutorily the commission is to assess fees and collect fees. Okay. The questions, if you recall those that were in through the interim, I think I always asked those questions or asked them as we went along, and they go, no, we go through the rulemaking process and follow it. What this is just a clear delegation by the legislature into statute of that authority. And so it's pretty simple in that respect, is that we come in, and so there's an addition on this regarding just a report to the Minerals Committee of the fees that are collected. And I know as we've worked some of these issues, what came up with the Uniform Consumer Credit Code is what are those fees, what are being held in those accounts. I understand we've got this so that we can, and I don't know, Commissioner Fortner, when we get to it, you may have a question on lines 22 and 23 of how we identify that to make that report more easily generated. We don't want it to be burdensome. But as we go through the bill, what we wanted to do is we look at Title 34, digital assets. We want to make sure that we have caught that. There's a little bit of a common theme here with some of the blockchain stuff in bills that we've put through. We did not clearly specify the rulemaking authority. So that's what we're cleaning up. So we're getting a general overall rulemaking authority and that process for the commission. And then we're coming in and we're picking up some of these where it isn't crystal clear. Not saying that it hasn't been followed anyway, but 3429-104 digital asset, which 4014 is Uniform Consumer Credit Code that we just went through. We dropped down 5419 is I think rental purchase agreements. 20 or 4022. I'm sitting here, I lost my notes. So that's the Wyoming Money Transmitters Act. And 2023, what is that? Residential Mortgage Practices Act. And then we dropped down 4029-104, which was a financial technology sandbox. Now, the thing that's in common with all those is that we have the ability for the commission to charge a fee. All we're doing is clearly saying that they have the direct statutory authority to go through the rulemaking process and to set those fees. Okay, so that's a general overview of the legislation. There's an amendment that we sent out that deals with allowing the commissioner to go ahead and give a credit in those situations where the fee might be too much in any given year. And I'll let the commissioner go ahead and direct that when it's time for him to speak. And then the rest of the amendment are just conforming language with that. So I'm trying to speed along. That's just a really quick overview why this bill is here. I think it's just really a good cleanup item on some of the work that we did this last year and some of the work that's been done over the years. So with that, I think it might be best is Commissioner Fortner, if you want to make your comments and any concerns with respect to the bill, and then maybe address the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Albert Fortner, Banking Commissioner here at the Division of Banking in Wyoming. And yeah, so this, I think the chairman summarized it well. It's just a reporting mechanism. And really, we obviously have no concerns or objections to it. I believe in full transparency of government agencies. And although we're an other fund agency, 100% other funds, no general funds flow this way, I still think there's a responsibility for everyone who is subject to the fees that we assess. And, whether you call it a fee or a tax, it's a private businesses paying in to fund government operations, and in this case, supervision and oversight of the financial services sector. So I think we looked into this a little bit to make sure how that we can generate the report in an efficient and effective manner. We collect, or we have the authority to collect 53 different fees in the 5 acts that we administer. Now, some of those are never collected upon because maybe it's some sort of late fee that there's never, it's not late, whatever's due, reports, information, things like that. So, and again, like I said, that's spread over our banking and non-banking areas. Those 53 fees roll into 6 revenue codes that we track in the state's reporting system, the WOLS system. But we did verify that we can drill down within that and we can identify at the fee level. Because there was one question I had early on. It looked like we need to identify specific fees when we aggregate them in the revenue codes. And of those 6, actually, we don't even use all 6 of them. I think we've got 4 that are actively used. So when you look at the Division of Banking's budget, part of the Department of Audit, all of those fees run into we aggregate those into the various revenue codes. But yeah, we found out that we should be able to pull those out internally and generate the report. Otherwise, we've got different systems that don't necessarily talk to each other, but I think we're good there. We may have to do a little trial and error, but we've got some time to do that, it looks like. And if I might, Mr. Chairman, yeah, the other thing that I brought up and appreciate the chairman taking into consideration is this concept of actually being able to lower a fee. As we look through the statutes, and we try to maintain a reserve account of around 3/4 of a biennium, and we do that to ensure that if there's a disruption in the revenue stream that comes in, and that mainly comes from consolidations or mergers of acquisitions in the banking sector. Those have been the largest impacts. And we've had some large banks either sell and leave the state or consolidate into one charter. Over my 22 years, we've had some big impacts. But this provides us a sufficient amount of runway to determine whether we need to adjust the fees, if we can absorb the loss in revenue, if we can do things on the expense side. And that's worked well over the time frame. We were getting the reserve account was getting a little bit high a couple of years ago, mostly from growth in our non-bank sector. We've had a tremendous amount of growth of mortgage companies and things like that licensed in Wyoming. But we didn't really have an opportunity to lower the fee at all. And we've had, actually, as you go back to the banking side, we've had a tremendous amount of banking asset growth. And the fees that the banks pay is based on the size of the institution, and it's on a tiered structure. So other states have had this issue, whether it's charter conversions or things of that nature, or again, just organic growth within the sector, that gives the ability to, in essence, give the money back to those that the money is due, as opposed to building up a big war chest. And sitting on funds that just aren't necessary for the administration of the various acts. So that's what when you get to it, that's what the language of the proposed amendment addresses. That if at some point it looks as though we don't need all of the revenue that we're projecting over the fiscal year or the biennium, the commissioner has the ability to anything from a fee holiday or just a reduction in the level of the fees. And so that hopefully is I think it's a fair approach. And like I said, it's something that had never really contemplated needing to do in the past, but I think this is an appropriate time to do that. And so unless there's any specific questions, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any other questions.
Okay. I think Representative Sherwood, she at least emailed me a question that I didn't know the answer to. So if she wants to ask that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was more curiosity on when these assessments would be made, whether it would be monthly or quarterly or annually, just out of my own curiosity.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, so they come in different times throughout the year, although we've started to aggregate them a little bit more. The banks pay a semi-annual assessment, and they pay in arrears, so they pay based on December 31st and June 30th. Our non-depository side of the house, those licenses all renew at the end of the year, December 31. So we get a big chunk. We open up renewals November 1st, and it can run into early January, into January. So we'll get a big chunk of annual revenue there. And then we get some revenue. We staff the collection agency board, so we get some administrative reimbursement, expense reimbursement from them, and that comes in towards the end of each fiscal year.
Commissioner, I didn't know, and Representative Sherwood, that's what I thought, is it was once a year, or as the assessments came in. So, okay. Committee, any questions? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Faulkner. Okay, so this provision in 13-1603, the First Amendment, does that change any of your authority, or is that just cleanup? Because I'm not sure. Do you get any more in this bill, any more fees that you're able to get control of over the legislature? Let me just ask that explicitly, because I don't think you do, but I'm not sure on that first provision. That's my main thing. The rest of it seems to be more oversight, but that's my question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, no, the way I read it, that yeah, it's kind of a changing of the wording a little bit. So if you go through Title 13, there's various sections throughout the title that says, we can charge, say, an application fee, and then it'll give wording, subject to rules and regulations of the commissioner. And so the authority is already in there, peppered throughout the various statutes. And I think, this appears to me to be more cleanup, and instead of, from this act to this title.
So, Commissioner, to follow up on that, the language, but does not exceed I'm glad we had the conversation, because we have that do not exceed, but now we actually have a mechanism if you do exceed, because you've missed on your estimates on how to give that back. So I do think the proposed amendment balances out that more restrictive language on line 11.
Mr. Chairman, correct. And I also, as I went back and looked at it, if you just go up a couple lines to line 9 of page 1, right at the end there, to the extent practicable, I think that also allows that flexibility, because that was a concern for the rest of the committee members. You set a application fee, and let's use the SPDI. That's our newest one, and it's our largest one. The idea of the fee structure is that it covers the cost of doing, in this case, the investigation for a charter. And depending upon the complexity of the business, we may, and I guarantee you, we spent more than our application fee on the first 2 SPDIs because they were new and the whole thing is brand new and extremely complex. Our next 2, I think, will probably be closer to appropriate in the time and resources spent on them. So in theory, if you read it without that extent practical, each one would have to be a customized fee, and we just you don't have that kind of level of granularity in the fee structure of like an application. So I think we're covered there. And then to the chairman's point, yeah, the proposed amendment would, if at some point we continue to generate revenue in excess of what we need, we've got an ability to give it back.
Okay. Any further questions for the commissioner? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that this will make it easier to adjust the fees up and down, but is there any limitation on how large of those fee adjustments can be in this legislation? Is there a limit how much those fees can change in any given year?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, no, I don't think there's a cap to it, other than, again, if you look at how the fee structure has to be done, and again, set out in the various acts, it talks about the costs, in this case here, approximates, but does not exceed the direct and indirect costs. And so when we would go through the proposal, and on the banks, we've not raised the banking fee for 20 years now. We're in our 21st year. So if for some reason there was some exorbitant fee increase proposed, the rulemaking process would give all parties the ability to not only make comment, potentially object, and even request a hearing, and we would have to defend that. And if you don't have a way to defend your fee increase, then it's probably not appropriate. But to your specific question, there's not any sort of percentage cap or dollar cap on them specifically throughout the various acts.
So, Commissioner, if I may follow up on Representative Heiner's question, this bill does not make it easier to raise fees. What it makes it clear that you'll do it through the rulemaking process and subject to the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act for all fees. Is that a better statement?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. No, I didn't want Representative Heiner. I didn't want to make it easier for them. I wanted to make sure they were going to do it right all the time. Okay. Yeah. Any further questions for Commissioner Fortner? Okay. Seeing none. Mr. Meyer, did you have comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only comment is that I think that perhaps we need to amend the bill that says something to the effect that if in fact they decide they want to raise the fees, that they can't do so without the advice and consent of the WBA. Other than that, I think the bill is fine, Mr. Chairman, and we stand in support of it.
Okay.
And I didn't even see our division chair over there jump out of his chair at all, so he must be okay with that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Meyer, in all seriousness, though, is banking fees haven't been what was it, 20 years, and I would hope that through the rulemaking process to change those fees, that the organization does have the right to give advice and consent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that's exactly it, and I do think that it is a welcome change to the statutes that everybody is clear now that if there were proposed changes in fees, up or down or whatever it is, that it does go through the rulemaking process, and I think that that is nothing but clarity, and clarity is always good.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Meyer? Okay. Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. All right, committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Bill.
Moved by Heiner, seconded by Western. Okay. We do have, I did email the proposed amendment, which Commissioner Fortner did address. The bulk of it, I mean, the key component of it is that they can, if there's the opportunity, they can decrease the assessments, right? They can either lower the amount, how do we got here? Decrease the aggregate amount of an installment and lower the amount to each financial institution. And then the rest of the amendment is just extending the requirements, which is a report to the Minerals Committee, to include the amendment. So it's just all conforming language after that. So but I guess I'm the chair. I should have Representative Duncan take the chair, but somebody want to move the amendment for me? Representative Duncan, seconded by Burkhart. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, question on the amendment. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, I see that as unanimous. Okay. All right, any further discussion on the bill, committee? Okay.
The bill, or I'm sorry, question.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Duncan.
No, I was calling question. I tried to move the question.
Oh, okay. Question being called. Cindy, are you ready for us? We do a roll
I
call.
am. Representative Bear.
Aye.
Representative Burkhart.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Air has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Gray.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Western.
Aye.
And Chairman Greer.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Committee, is there anyone, I mean, I realize this is sponsored by me, but is there anyone on the committee that would like to practice floor managing a bill? I mean,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Representative Western hasn't done any yet. So, maybe.
Representative Western, do you want to floor manage this for us, or I'm always there as backup?
I would love to, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, practice makes perfect, Representative Western, and I do. This is sort of what I call a chairman's bill, something we should have caught as a committee, and I couldn't get it in, so I consider this part of our interim work, quite frankly. But We'll talk, Representative Western. We'll talk. Okay. All right. Very good. Committee, great work. Apologize you had to sit through all my bills, which, as you can see, are earth. You know, they're just really get everybody excited, and they're not as controversial as some by any stretch, but still important. My plan is, our plan is to go ahead and convene at 8 o'clock on March 1st. Okay, that's when we get back into session. We don't go in, we don't gavel in till 10. But I think we're just getting a habit. Just go ahead and meet at 8. Should be back down in committee room 5. That's on the east side. Representative Heiner, the only thing I really got in the hopper to bring out is your bill. So we'll hear your bill, and so if you'll get, we'll make sure we'll send a note to DEQ and the industrial siting council, and whoever else you want to testify, have them ready. We'll start at 8, and we'll work through that. See what comes of it. Okay, very good. And then we'll just go from there, folks. I think Representative Gray's got a bill with the Business Council. I was hoping it would get assigned to us so we could work it Monday, but we'll take stuff as they come to us and do our job. And good work. I appreciate it. We'll actually finish 4 minutes ahead of schedule, so that's good. Anyway, hey, thank you. Appreciate it, guys. See you all around 5:15, except for Representative Sherwood. I won't see you. I'll see our Republican members at 5:15. So anyway, thanks everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Chairman Greer,
Yes, ma'am.
would you mind sending me the amendments from the first and second bill that we worked today, as well as from that last bill? I have no amendments at all.
Okay. So Representative Duncan probably sent those to Carol, I bet.
Okay.
No, I think I sent them to Cindy, but maybe I sent them to the wrong Cindy.
Well, I'll check upstairs as soon as I get back up there. There was nothing before I left upstairs to come down for the meeting.
No, I sent them during the meeting.
Oh, you did? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
All
so, Chairman Greer, I do have an appointment at 12:30, and so I may give you a call this afternoon, or would you prefer I call Vice Chairman Duncan? And just be sure that I have those correct as far as how those amendments were amended.
Yeah. So why don't we do this? Representative Duncan, will you send Cindy the banking commission one, so they all go to the same place, so we're consistent on that from the last
Okay.
group? Okay.
So all of the amendments that you sent me previously, go ahead and attach them and send it.
Yeah, and then Cindy, go ahead and work with Representative Duncan, and then you guys can call me if there's a concern. But I think that'll just be cleaner. Are you fine with that, Shelley?
Yeah, Chairman Greer, I CC'd you